His death risks escalating a growing conflict with Tehran. Speaking to Bloomberg earlier, Barbara Slavin, non-resident senior fellow at the Atlantic Council and director of the Future of Iran Initiative, stressed the severity of the attack.
I'm not sure Donald Trump understands the implications of what he has unleashed. He thinks he's a big hero, but a lot more people are probably going to die because of this.
And Iran's Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei has already threatened there will be, quote, severe retaliation. So we wait and wonder what that could be, Roger. But as I was just saying earlier as well, U.S. Defense Secretary Mark Esper told reporters on Thursday yesterday, we're prepared to exercise self-defense and we're prepared to deter further bad behavior from these groups, all of which are sponsored and directed and resourced by Iran. So the U.S. there taking a more defensive, preemptive stance.
There are other stories around, of course. Investors are looking to the US today, where the Federal Reserve issues the minutes of its December policy meeting. Bloomberg's Vinny Del Giudice has the preview.
It's time to read the tea leaves. We know Fed officials maintain a federal funds target between 1.5% and 1.75% following 3 consecutive rate cuts. So Bloomberg Economics advises investors to keep their eyes peeled for comments indicating what it would take for Fed officials to alter their wait-and-see stance. The officials, Bloomberg Economics notes, are keen to stay on the sidelines during an election year. 13 of 17 officials forecast no change in rates in 2020. Vinny Del Giudice, Bloomberg, Daybreak Europe.
We've also got ISM manufacturing data, of course, out of the US today. Another reading below 50 is expected. And amid all that, later today on Bloomberg Television and Radio, we'll speak to Chicago's Fed President Charles Evans at 4 p.m. London time and the head of Cleveland's Fed, Loretta Mester, at 6 p.m. London time.
Now, on to the latest in the Carlos Ghosn saga. Interpol has issued a wanted notice for the former automotive giant, and Lebanon's justice minister says his country will, quote, carry out its duties. Ghosn jumped bail and fled to Lebanon a few days ago rather than face charges of financial misconduct in Tokyo. And Bloomberg Opinion's Chris Bryant says Ghosn may seek to fight charges in Lebanon or perhaps even in France instead.
Those, I think, would be a pretty reasonable alternative, because if Mr. Ghosn wants to carry on his life before, remember the quintessential Davos man, jet-setting guy, he probably doesn't want to just sit it out in Lebanon for the rest of his life.
And as to the latest comments from Ghosn himself on his escape, he says his wife Carol played no part, and he'll finally communicate freely with the media as soon as next week.
And all, it seems, is well in Techland. Apple joined the Nasdaq in hitting another record, topping $300 amid optimism for a robust holiday quarter. More from Bloomberg's Charlie Pellet.
The iPhone maker rose 2.3% to a record amid a broader rally in technology stocks. The gain was in stark contrast to the dismal start that Apple had last year when it cut its sales forecast for the first time in almost 2 decades, exactly a year ago. Despite the setback, Apple went on to outperform all other mega-cap technology stocks in 2019 with a gain of 86%, its best year in a decade. Charlie Pellet, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Now, Tesla's cut the price of its China-built Model 3 sedans. They'll now start at $46,500 before state subsidies, a 9% discount. That's as the car maker steps up efforts to lure customers in the world's biggest electric vehicle market.
Those are your top stories. Now with the latest in global news, here's Leanne Gerrans. Hi, Leanne.
Naira, good morning. In Australia, authorities have declared a state of emergency and ordered thousands of tourists to evacuate before extreme conditions over the weekend. The death toll has now climbed to 20. From Sydney, Bloomberg's Ed Johnson reports.
Holidaymakers have been told to get out of a 350-kilometre strip of coastline that runs from Nowra, about 3 hours south of Sydney, right down to the border of Victoria State. The fires have killed 10 people in the 2 states this week alone, and pressure is building on Prime Minister Scott Morrison over his handling of the crisis. In Sydney, Ed Johnson, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Crossing over to Europe, Spain is set to finally get a new government. That's after acting Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez persuaded a Catalan separatist party to help him take office for a second term. Esquerra Republicana agreed to abstain in a confidence vote in Parliament, giving Sanchez the numbers he needs to form a socialist-led coalition. Now, here in the UK, Boris Johnson's top advisor says he wants to recruit weirdos and misfits as part of a drive to overhaul the UK government. Bloomberg's Sebastian Sarlik reports.
Dominic Cummings says he's seeking an unusual set of people with different skills and backgrounds to work in Downing Street. Hinting at a wider restructuring of the civil service, he says profound problems exist with the current process of high-level decision-making. In his 3,000-word blog, Cummings also said Brexit requires changes to how the UK makes decisions. In London, I'm Sebastian Sarlik, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And finally, Austria's new government plans to push the boundaries of conventional economic energy and tax policies in its bid to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The Conservatives, People Party and the environmentalist Greens have laid out their policy blueprint for their new coalition under Chancellor Sebastian Kurz. Their pledges include a range of measures to put the Alpine country on a path to become climate neutral by 2040. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrand. This is Bloomberg Roger.
Leanne, thank you for that. And still ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, oil has surged after the US airstrike in Iraq kills one of Iran's most powerful generals. The Iranian Supreme Leader, Ali Khamenei, has vowed severe retaliation, and the US Defense Secretary has talked about a policy of preparation and holding down in order to try and, I guess, deal with whatever retaliation might be coming from Iran. We have all the analysis on that next, what it means for the global economy at the start of a year which had seemed to augur very well for stocks, but at the moment stocks not looking quite so happy. This is Bloomberg.
Message and data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at babbel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
More than just a game, baseball is big business. For the Atlanta Braves, this meant bringing a $1 billion stadium project to life through a public-private partnership, creating the Battery, a mixed-use development that turned an underdeveloped area into a thriving community.
Always on the cutting edge of community development, Cohn Resnick advises industry participants on tax credits, affordable housing, opportunity zones, and more, helping communities reach their full potential. Explore more at cohnresnick.com/MLB. Cohn Resnick, Advisory Assurance Tax. Transform your game.
My name is Hunter Hayes. I know myself, and I know my buzzed warning signs. One shot is about knowing my limits, or not necessarily knowing my limits.
I start with one shot to have a good time.
One of the signs that I'm starting to feel a little buzzed is when I start solving not only my own problems, but the entire world's problems. When I know I'm going out, I know I'm going to start with calling for a ride. Buzz driving is drunk driving. A message brought to you by NHTSA and the Ad Council.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Sherry Ann.
Joining us now is Mainstay Capital Management founder, CEO, and chief investment strategist David Kudla. We are seeing a bit more calm in the repo markets. The Fed, of course, injecting more than $240 billion or so into the system. But what happens once that starts to run off? This is supposed to be temporary liquidity, no?
Well, it's supposed to be temporary liquidity. But if you look at what Kathleen, look at everything she covered there, and she covered a lot of ground. And it's important not only in terms of what's happening to rates or what the Fed is doing, but it's important for those of us investing, or me as an investment strategist, because the Fed has had such an impact on the financial markets. It's not just about what happens with interest rate policy. They could be on hold for the remainder of this year. They could be on hold until the election, which is probable. I think they try to get interest rate cuts out of the way in 2019 so that they can be on hold and not seen biased either way relative to the upcoming presidential elections coming later this year. But we have liquidity that is coming into the system. And whether, we've referred to it as not QE, But it's a quantity of money coming into the financial system that has buoyed stocks.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters in London, I'm Sandra Kilhoff with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. Now, oil is on a tear this morning after U.S. airstrike in Baghdad has killed a top Iranian commander. We're seeing risk-off sentiment boosting havens. Oil futures in New York and London surging as well. WTI now up 3% at $63 a barrel. Brent well above $68 a barrel. Gold gaining 1% to $1,544 a troy ounce as we digest that news. Treasuries also reacting. The 10-year yield currently down almost 6 basis points to 1.82%. That move into safety pushing 10-year bund yields down 4 basis points to negative 26 basis points. 10-year gilt yields sliding 4 basis points to 76 basis points. In currencies, the yen is bid this morning, gaining the most in 2 months, now at 107.9, up 0.5% against the dollar, while the greenback is standing pat and set to decline 0.3% on the week. The Aussie and Kiwi dollars are both down more than 0.5%. Traders there shorting those currencies. I'm also keeping a close eye on sterling this morning. It's weakening for a third day in a row, currently down 0.3%, just above that 131 mark. Stock markets also selling off amid that downturn in sentiment. Europe's stock 600 down 0.6%. The FTSE lower by 0.3%. The DAX falling 0.9%. US futures also very much in the red. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Gerrans with more on what's going on around the world.
Sandra, thank you. Turkey's parliament has authorized deploying troops to support Libya's internationally recognized administration against rival forces. The Libyan government is battling militias backed by Russian mercenaries, Egypt and the United Arab Emirates. The White House says President Trump spoke to Turkish leader Erdogan about the move, warning him that foreign interference is complicating the situation. Now to Southern Africa. Zambia is on the brink of famine due to climate change. According to experts, the country is wrestling with the devastating drought caused by changing weather patterns. The UN is calling for urgent action as temperatures in parts of southern Africa are expected to rise by twice the global average as a result of climate change. And finally, tennis player Nick Kyrgios will donate 200 Aussie dollars for each ace he hits in events held in Australia this month to help those affected by the bushfires. He's also calling on Tennis Australia to host a fundraising exhibition. Kyrgios is one of the leading servers on the ATP Tour, averaging 16 aces per match last year. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on QuickTake by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Naira.
Leanne, thank you so much. Now, getting back to our top story, and Iran's supreme leader has vowed severe retaliation after a US airstrike killed one of the Islamic Republic's most powerful generals. The market reaction was immediate, with Brent crude and WTI futures surging after the attack. For more, let's go live to Dubai, where Bloomberg executive editor for the Middle East, Riyad Hamadeh, is standing by. Riyad, great to have you here with Roger and myself. Roger was pointing out earlier that US citizens have been warned to depart via airline while possible, and failing that, to other countries via land. The US Embassy in Baghdad urging American citizens in Iraq to depart immediately for fear of fallout from the US killing of an Iranian top commander. Riyad, when Iran talks about severe retaliation, what could we be looking at in terms of retaliation from Iran?
Iran has recently shown what it is capable of when it struck the Saudi oil facilities, which basically cut Saudi oil production in half. It also showed that it can strike at the tanker traffic that is so key to the global oil markets. Furthermore, Iran, one of the reasons why the U.S. is telling its citizens to leave Iraq is that Iran has influence with various paramilitary militias in Iraq, in Syria, in Lebanon, and other places as well, which it could activate should it choose to.
Now, Riyad, I mean, the rhetoric on both sides is clearly escalating, and on the US side, the action too. But inside Iran at the moment, do you think there's a willingness to go even further, risking and the further escalation from the US, and perhaps some suggestion of kind of all-out war between Tehran and Washington at some point? Or would they really, do you think, prefer, all things considered, to do what they need to do, but then to back off?
That's a great question. I'm not sure I can answer it definitively. I'm sure there's different points of view within the Iranian leadership. I mean, it's not a monolithic structure. There are people in Iran who have been arguing for many years to de-escalate things with the U.S. to try and fix the economy, which has taken a serious hit in recent years from the sanctions, particularly since President Trump tightened the sanctions on Iran. So there's definitely two schools of thought within Iran on how to deal with U.S. pressure. Having said that, with something like this, something as spectacular as this, those who are arguing for a hard line are likely to have a louder voice right now, and who will take this as evidence that there's no point really in talking to the U.S., there's no point in reaching agreements with them, and they feel that the only way really is to try and establish some sort of balance of power by striking back on U.S. allies or U.S. facilities. Yeah. Now, whether that will work or not remains to be seen. I don't think the Iranians would be interested in an all-out war.
Right, and just to build on that, Riyadh, are these hardline voices that you say might be louder likely to get more loud, or actually want to back off a little when you hear things from the US, or if the US delivers on its pledge that it's ready to deploy more force in Iraq and that it's taking a more sort of defensive, preventative stance? Defense Secretary Mark Esper told that to reporters on Thursday, saying we're prepared to exercise self-defense.
I think if you hear what President Rouhani just said, what the Supreme Leader Khamenei just said, it just feels like even the moderate voices, the more moderate voices, are having to go out and say this needs a response. We need to respond to this. Soleimani will not have died in vain. So I think, if you ask me right now, I think the answer has to be the hardliners will take this as evidence that talking doesn't work, and that they need to strike back to show the U.S. that there is a price to pay for these actions.
Riyadh, thank you so much. Riyadh Hamadi, they're live on the line from Dubai. Some breaking news. China's denied the report on the Shanghai-London Stock Connect halt. That coming in the last few minutes.
This is a Bloomberg Market Minute. Wall Street begins the session with the major averages at all-time highs, after the Nasdaq led the market to a solid advance yesterday. Jonathan McKay at Schroders Wealth Management sees further gains ahead as trade and other uncertainties fade into the background.
Less uncertainty is by definition more certainty, and so I think that allows the fundamentals to start coming through a little bit better than they have.
Investors will be watching the Federal Reserve today as it releases the minutes from last month's policy meeting. We will also see data today on manufacturing, construction, and auto sales. Weather could be problematic for SpaceX's first planned mission of the new year. A Falcon 9 rocket is slated to take 60 Starlink communication satellites into orbit from Cape Canaveral. But forecasters see just a 40% likelihood of favorable conditions, with winds and clouds the main concerns. Larry Kofsky, Bloomberg Radio.
Are you interested in a challenging and exciting career? One where you can be part of solving complex challenges across industries and geographies? Bloomberg's ever-expanding technology, data, news, and media services foster innovation, empower clients, and offer nearly limitless opportunities for career growth. Visit Bloomberg.com/careers today to view our current job opportunities. Bloomberg LP is an equal opportunity employer. The address once again is Bloomberg.com/careers.
Portfolio Analyst, powered by Interactive Brokers, helps sophisticated investors understand the health of their complete financial portfolio. Portfolio Analyst is free and easy-to-use personal finance software that creates a consolidated view of banking, brokerage, and credit card accounts. Compare your consolidated portfolio against more than 200 benchmarks or create customized benchmarks for analyzing performance. Calculate time and money-weighted rates of return and use Portfolio Analyst for forecasting. Sign up for free at portfolioanalyst.com.
Hey y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now if...
Welcome to Nuffield Health Fulham, a gym built around you. You get regular health MOTs to create a plan that works for you, with physios and personal trainers on site. You'll find a swimming pool, and our expert team will help you get the most out of your health, fitness, and your membership. Join today to get the rest of the month free. Search Nuffield Health. Specialists in you. 12-month commitments only. Facilities stated are in most gyms. Visit nuffieldhealth.com/terms.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards, at the goal line, it's intercepted!
Listen live as the action unfolds or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught, it is in for the right side for the touchdown to Keenan.
Search NFL today.
Are you curious what others are listening to on TuneIn? Head to the trending section under Browse to see the most popular stations and podcasts among TuneIn listeners right now. Check it out. You might just discover something new for yourself.
Introducing a new podcast, ESPN Daily. When you want to go beyond your feed, when you want to get inside the score, when you want to get behind the highlight, there's ESPN Daily. Go deeper into the stories of the moment. Get the exclusive access and insider perspective that only ESPN can give you. ESPN Daily, hosted by me, Mina Kimes. Listen and favorite ESPN Daily on TuneIn.
We can't make traffic move faster during rush hour, but we can help you catch up on the news with TuneIn. With live around-the-clock news from MSNBC.
In the UK, they're significantly worse. When the president gets up to the podium...
CNBC and Fox News Talk.
The Fox News poll sizing up the race for 2020 found that each of the 5 top Democrats...
You can use your stop and go for good by staying in touch with the world. Search news to hear what's happening now.
Next time you look up at the stars, think about this.
Inside you are the remains of a stellar explosion. You are made of stardust. And without the stars, there wouldn't be us.
I'm Guy Raz, the wonders of the universe and the people who still look up every night. Next time on the TED Radio Hour from NPR. You can subscribe to the TED Radio Hour on TuneIn.
On DAB Digital Radio, to New York, Bloomberg 1130, to Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1, to Boston, Bloomberg 106.1, to San Francisco, Bloomberg 960, and around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
8:30 a.m. in London, 9:30 if you're listening in Paris, Frankfurt or Brussels. Good morning, everyone. I'm Naira Chehich.
And I'm Roger Hearing, and you're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And on this Friday, 30 minutes into the equity market open here in Europe, we're certainly still seeing a risk-off tone in equities. The Stock 600 down 0.5% after gaining 0.9% yesterday. Across regional equity benchmarks, the FTSE 100 and CAC 40 both lower by 0.4%. The DAX lower by 0.9%. IBEX and FTSE MIB also firmly in the red. And US futures trending significantly lower. The Nasdaq down more than 1% in terms of futures. S&P futures and Dow futures down almost 0.9%. This after we saw all 3 US benchmarks hit records yesterday, and tech was among one of the biggest gainers. But today, the clear risk-off tone is largely down, or all down, to geopolitical risk that's having an impact across assets. Of course, the airstrike by the US in Iraq, killing a top Iranian commander, it's reverberated through all markets. Oil, particularly surging after that. Brent crude up 3%, 68.30. WTI up 2.9%, 62.95. Equities selling off. We are also seeing money move into safe haven. So the 10-year Treasury yield down 6 basis points on a 183 handle. Yields moving lower in both the core and the periphery in Europe. And the yen bid in FX. Out of G10, you are seeing some dollar strength generally across most G10 currencies, but the yen being the ultimate safe haven today, 108.03, hitting a 2-month high. And hitting a 4-month high is gold, currently up almost 1%, trading at $1,543 an ounce.
And we're getting some news breaking across the terminal about Hong Kong. Hong Kong November retail sales value, well, they were down 23.6% year on year. That's slightly better than the estimate, which was down 24.6%. But in terms of volume, they were down 25.4% year on year, and the estimate was 25.1%. So pretty grim news anyway you look at it, really, for Hong Kong.
Moving on to our top stories, and a US airstrike in Iraq ordered by President Donald Trump killed one of Iran's most powerful generals in a provocation that risks escalating a growing conflict with the Islamic Republic. More from Bloomberg's Mark Mills.
Qasem Soleimani, the head of Iran's elite Quds force, was killed in an airstrike at Baghdad's International Airport, an attack the Pentagon says was ordered by President Trump. New Jersey Democratic Senator Cory Booker said Soleimani had American blood on his hands.
He has plotted, planned, and executed attacks on American citizens, American soldiers.
Soleimani was a huge figure in Iranian military and political affairs. Many analysts, including Barbara Slavin, director of the Future of Iran Initiative, are worried about Iranian retaliation.
I'm very worried that there will be retaliation for this against American diplomats or military personnel or innocent civilians.
The death of Soleimani heightened fears that rising tensions between the U.S. and Iran could lead to an armed confrontation. Mark Mills, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
On to the latest in the Carlos Ghosn saga. The former automotive giant has denied reports his wife and other family members helped organize his escape to Lebanon. He says he put together the getaway plan on his own. It's still not clear how exactly Ghosn got out of the country, evading round-the-clock surveillance. Prosecutors have begun a search of Ghosn's Tokyo residence, where he'd been under house arrest.
In top corporate news, shares of Apple begin the day at a record high. They crossed over the $300 mark for the first time on a split-adjusted basis. There's increased optimism about Apple's performance during the holiday quarter. That's due to demand for wearables such as AirPods and planned services, including streaming TV. And what a move to start the year as well. It's really interesting because actually what we saw in 2019, at the start of 2019, Roger, is Apple had a really quite a dismal start when it cut its sales forecast for the first time in almost 2 decades. Despite that setback, though, Apple went on to outperform all of the mega cap tech stocks in 2019 with a gain of 86%. So it had its best year in a decade, and now we get this start to 2020.
And very much showing the importance of moving into other areas like services.
Yeah.
That's where it's doing well. Meanwhile, the world's largest luxury conglomerate, LVMH, will close a store in Hong Kong's shopping district. That's according to South China Morning Post. Overall retail sales in the city, as we heard, have fallen since the start of anti-government protests. The owner of a shopping mall in Hong Kong's Causeway Bay reportedly refused LVMH's request to lower rents.
Those are your top stories. For the latest in global news, here's Bloomberg's Leanne Gerrans. Hi, Leanne.
Good morning, Naira. Thousands of people stranded on the east coast of Australia due to wildfires have been evacuated by the country's Navy. A state of disaster has been declared in Victoria, where residents had to flee to beaches to avoid the flames. 2 ships are now starting an operation to take people to safety. Prime Minister Scott Morrison has praised the community's response.
It being done in a very coordinated way, in a very calm way, reduces the risk of injury and threatening people's safety. And I was pleased to see today even the orderly way in which people are leaving the area, being patient in the queues, and I think that's extraordinarily helpful.
Crossing over to Europe, Spain is finally set to get a new government. Acting Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez persuaded a Catalan separatist party to help him take office for a second term. That means another socialist coalition and the first proper government since last March. A final vote in the Spanish Parliament is expected on January the 7th. Here in the UK, Boris Johnson's top advisor is looking for weirdos and misfits as part of a drive to reform the UK government. In a 3,000-word blog post, closed. Dominic Cummings says he's seeking an unusual set of people with different skills and backgrounds to work in Downing Street, hinting at a wider restructuring of the civil service. He says there are profound problems at the core of how the British state actually makes decisions. And finally, governments across Asia are taking measures to secure their borders against a mysterious pneumonia outbreak in central China. Bloomberg's Samson Ellis has all those details.
Airports in Taiwan, Singapore and Hong Kong are bringing in or intensifying temperature checks for all passengers, especially those from the Chinese city of Wuhan, where dozens of people have fallen ill. The cases have been traced back to a fresh produce market that sold birds, pheasants and snakes, along with other wildlife, triggering worries about the potential jump of an unknown virus to humans in Taipei. Samson Ellis, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Roger.
Leanne, thank you. Well, let's have a look at the auto industry, which underwent some seismic changes in 2019, from the incarceration and escape of the industry titan, Carlos Ghosn, of course, in Japan, to a tie-up between two of Europe's largest and oldest car makers. Looking ahead to the future, electric battery technology, connected cars and autonomous vehicles will become dominant themes for the sector. Well, for more on all this, we're joined by Michael Dean, Bloomberg Intelligence Senior European Autos Analyst. Michael, welcome. Good morning. How far do the European car makers have to go before they can plant on emissions, for a start?
Good morning. So they certainly have a way to go. On average, they need about a 15% cut in their fleet's CO2 emissions in 2020 compared to 2019. Just to put that into context, in 2019 they managed to cut their emissions by about 5%. So still a long way to go. They're going to do this with three technologies: 48-volt mild hybrid technology, which reduces emissions by between 10 and 15%. Also more battery electric vehicles and more plug-in hybrid vehicles. And the incentive to do this is very high. So if the industry in Europe were to miss by about 5%, that would result in about €4.5 billion of fines for the European car makers next year.
Wow. So, Michael, we also heard that Tesla cut the starting price of its China-built Model 3 sedans by 9%. This, of course, is its stepping up efforts to lure customers into the world's biggest EV market. In terms of competitors for European car makers, as Tesla sort of leading the pack for EV makers, is it the main competitor, or are there any others that they should be worried about as well?
Well, the Germans are certainly catching up. But, Tesla, in terms of premium EVs, have pretty much had a free run since 2013. So we've had recent launches from Audi with their e-tron, Mercedes with their EQC, Porsche with their Taycan in the past 12 months or so. But these didn't really raise the tech bar against Tesla, but that will come in the next 2 or 3 years. So the competition is going to become much more intense over the next 12 to 24 months.
Now, luxury is obviously an interesting area. Ferrari was the top auto stock performer of the year. So what's going to drive earnings in 2020?
Yes, so Ferrari was up 70% its share price last year, and that was on the back of 5 new product launches, 3 very important product launches. So it's got the F8 Tributo, which replaces the 488. Also, it has the Roma, which is a hardtop Portofino, and also the SF90 Stradale, which is their first hybrid car, which costs £450,000. Very reasonable, I think, but it's unlimited production, so it'll be very profitable for them. So this is pretty much reflected in consensus for the next couple of years.
Yeah, and just give us an outlook for 2020 in terms of IPOs, perhaps in the luxury sector, but also in terms of consolidation and tie-ups in the auto industry.
Sure, so, Ferrari's current valuation, it's trading on 20 times EV/EBITDA. That's a 10% discount to Hermes, which is the top-rated luxury good maker. So certainly other car makers will be attracted to IPO their luxury brands. Volkswagen in particular has both Porsche and Lamborghini, and if you put Porsche on a 30% discount to Ferrari, it has similar EBITDA margins, then it could be worth as much as €100 billion, and that compares to the Volkswagen share price of €88 billion. Lamborghini is another potential IPO in the future. Then in terms of consolidation, we've seen Peugeot and Fiat come together. There's likely to be more consolidation, more cooperations, because of the high cost of the transition to electric vehicles.
All right, Michael, thanks very much. Michael Dean there, Bloomberg Intelligence Senior European Autos Analyst, looking at the prospects for that industry in the coming year. What will be good, what will be not, and what problems they still have to face. This is Bloomberg.
Listen, as a hiring manager, I've got to tell you, the best job candidate isn't always the typical candidate. Sometimes they're a grad of life.
Meet the grads of life. Young adults of unique determination and experience. An ideal fit for your company in an entry-level position, internship, or mentorship. They might not have every qualification you typically look for, but they're exactly who your company needs.
Sometimes the best candidates aren't the ones you're used to.
Go to gradsoflife.org to learn how to find, cultivate, and train this great pool of untapped talent. Brought to you by the Ad Council and gradsoflife.org.
Investors who put their money on the line to help build U.S. infrastructure deserve to be protected. That's what we do at BAM. Our unconditional guarantee means investors receive every payment of interest and principal when due, period. BAM-insured bonds have a high AA stable rating from S&P, and BAM credit profiles provide complete transparency on each and every transaction. BAM-insured bonds help build America's essential public projects. BAM, the feeling is mutual.
25 years ago, NJIT graduate Dick Sweeney co-founded Keurig Green Mountain, a company whose incredible innovations changed the way the world brews a cup of coffee. Today, he lectures widely on business leadership and is a strong advocate for NJIT's work to combine business education with the power of STEM.
NJIT is definitely fostering the innovative thinking for budding entrepreneurs simply because that's the world we live in. NJIT is producing students that have been trained, educated, and given the business acumen to be a contributor to a company. The distinct mission is to develop great STEM scholars. The attributes I've always looked for in team members are heart, smarts, guts, and luck. So we want people with passion, intelligence, courage, and never discount luck. The student coming out of NJIT has experienced all of that.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Asset managers who seized
the Grand DFS sale featuring Wallace.
Hello.
And Gromit.
Well, say hello, lad.
Every sofa is made to order.
By a speedy Sofa-matic machine.
By hand.
Oh, suit yourself.
So you can have your sofa exactly how you want it.
Made of cheese?
Not that exactly.
Oh, probably a good thing, eh, Gromit? It'd be gone in a jiffy.
The Grand DFS sale is now on.
How about a cushion made of cheese? Or a footstool?
This year, it's time to live well your way. Time to hit Boots. To reboot your get up and go. Reboot your fresh start. Reboot your vegan choices. And reboot your... Make 2020 your time for a reboot. Save up to half price on wellbeing products in-store on Boots.com or via the app. Boots. Let's feel good. Subject to availability. Exclusions apply. See in-store or online for details. Offer ends 28th of January.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip Bayless.
Follow at TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards, at the goal line, it's intercepted!
Listen live as the action unfolds or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught, it is in for the right side for the touchdown to Keenan.
Search NFL today.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
We can't make traffic move faster during rush hour, but we can help you catch up on the news with TuneIn. With live around-the-clock news from MSNBC.
In the UK, they're significantly worse. When the president gets up to the podium...
CNBC and Fox News Talk.
The Fox News poll sizing up the race for 2020 found that each of the 5 top Democrats...
You can use your stop and go for good by staying in touch with the world. Search news to hear what's happening now.
Introducing a new podcast, ESPN Daily. When you want to go beyond your feed, when you want to get inside the score, When you want to get behind the highlight, there's ESPN Daily. Go deeper into the stories of the moment. Get the exclusive access and insider perspective that only ESPN can give you. ESPN Daily, hosted by me, Mina Kimes. Listen now to ESPN Daily on TuneIn.
Pascal gobbles up the rebound and slams it down.
Catch your favorite NBA team right here on TuneIn.
A step back, deep three is up and in.
Search NBA on TuneIn and hear all the action. The NBA lives on TuneIn.
Did you know your favorite radio stations are in your pocket? Yes, the TuneIn app lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio anywhere you want. To see all the stations broadcasting in your area, find the local radio section on the home screen. Keep it local with TuneIn.
NFL playoffs are here. Make sure you don't miss a minute of this year's postseason action by setting a reminder on TuneIn. Just make sure notifications are allowed on your phone and search for your team on the TuneIn app. Find the game you want to hear and tap Notify Me. We'll send you an alert just in time for kickoff.
And breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters in London, I'm Sandra Kilhoff with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. Now, oil is on a tear this morning after U.S. airstrike in Baghdad has killed a top Iranian commander. Risk-off sentiment really boosting havens, and oil futures in New York and London have surged. We're seeing WTI currently up 3% at $63 a barrel. Brent well above $68 a barrel. Gold, meanwhile, gaining 1% to $1,544 a troy ounce. Treasuries also reacting to this news. The 10-year yield currently down 6 basis points at 1.82%. That move into safety, also pushing bund yields lower, currently down 5 basis points at negative 27. 10-year gilt yield sliding, currently down 4 basis points at 75 basis points. And currencies, the yen, very much bid, gaining the most in 2 months, now at 107.9, up 0.6% against the dollar. The greenback also gaining a little bit following its declines earlier this week, currently up 0.1% according to the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index. Aussie and Kiwi dollars both down 0.5%. Traders there shorting the currencies. I'm also keeping a close eye on sterling, currently down 0.3%, weakening for a third day in a row and just above 131. Stock markets also selling off amid that downturn in sentiment. We're seeing Europe stock 600 currently down 0.6%. The FTSE lower by 0.4%. The DAX falling more than a percent. US futures also very much in the red. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Garrins with more on what's going on around the world.
Sandra, thank you. A warning from the US to Argentina's President Alberto Fernandez. The Trump administration says that his early foreign policy moves may jeopardize support from the IMF. It could also cost Argentina investment in shale oil and gas fields. A US official says Argentina has crossed a red line by sheltering former Bolivian President Evo Morales and engaging with Venezuela's Nicolas Maduro. At least 42 people have died from flooding in Indonesia's Greater Jakarta area, and hundreds of thousands were evacuated on New Year's Day. That's according to the government's disaster agency. Some people in evacuation centres have returned to their houses as floodwater subsides and power is turned back on. And finally, here in the UK, the last decade was the second hottest and the second wettest in the past 100 years. The Met Office has confirmed 8 new temperatures records were set between 2010 and 2019. Analysts say with the climate continuing to warm, they expect more records to fall. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on QuickTake by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Garrins. This is Bloomberg NARA.
Leanne, when do we become a tropical climate?
Well, apparently, I can't believe this, but I was just looking up some of these records because I feel like, it's always a little bit chilly in London, even in the summer, but anyway, 21.2 was the maximum temperature last February here in London. Can you believe that?
I thought you were going to say in the summer then, and I thought, no, that's not right, February. Okay,
that was in February.
No, well, apparently, I think the other day, it was 17 degrees in Norway. in January. So
unprecedented, isn't it?
And they've never had that before.
Wow. Well, Leanne Gerrans with the world news and the weather. Thank you so much. Joining us in the studio for the rest of the hour, Wei Li, head of iShares EMEA Investment Strategy. Great to have you with us, Wei. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
We started the new year in a buoyant mood, and then today, risk assets take a hit with geopolitical risk rising to the surface again. Of course, it's something that investors had to contend with throughout a lot of 2019. Does this time and this incident in the Middle East feel any different to you?
It is a continuation of the geopolitical heightened tension that we have been experiencing for most part of 2019 as well, which is why as we navigate 2020, it is important on the one hand to stay invested in markets because we have a pro-cyclical tilt given growth rebound and given broadly better kind of trade tension. But on the other hand, it's also really important to build resilience, build diversification, and it is it's days like today that we really want to emphasize the importance of owning gold, inflation-linked bonds for your diversification.
Well, I was going to say diversification is good, but the trouble with a crisis like this, you don't really know necessarily what assets are going to get hit and in what way. We know obviously about oil, I guess, in the light of what's happened, but it's much wider than that, and it must be quite hard to gauge what is actually going to be safe, but still produce the kind of return that you want.
Absolutely. Sometimes when you think about resilience and staying invested in high conviction ideas, there is a bit of a trade-off. So we have done a lot of work in terms of analyzing recent periods of volatility and try to understand what works, what doesn't work, and very much recognizing what used to work in the past may not work in the future. So if you think about, for example, European government bonds, it is less effective as a diversifier now because we're getting so close to effective lower bound. So paying greater attention to diversifiers that have been working in recent volatility episodes is very important, and which is why we highlight inflation-linked bonds as well as gold, because they have been very effective in recent episodes.
How great a role should equities still play in a portfolio in 2020 after a really banner year for global equities in 2019?
We actually have become more constructive on equities broadly, dialing up our conviction in emerging market equities as well as Japanese equities because they have a cyclical tilt to global trade and global growth rebounds. Now, having said that, we very much recognize that 2019 has been a very good year. But if you think about the fact that it followed a very significant correction at the end of 2018, if you balance that out, the performance is not as significant as it looked on paper.
So where are the equities that you'd like to look at? What are the value areas as far as you're concerned? What are the pluses? What are the minuses?
Interesting that you mentioned value. We're actually becoming a little bit more positive on value. Upgrading it from underweight to neutral, recognizing that in an environment where growth is getting a little bit of a cyclical rebound and definitely stabilizing in most part of the world, recognizing that the curve is likely going to steepen from here, that should be supportive of value as a factor. Other value exposures that we like, emerging market, I talked about it, we upgraded from neutral to overweight. Japan has been quite attractive in terms of valuation. We upgraded from neutral to overweight as well. But in order to fund this upgrades, we have moderated our conviction in U.S. equities, so bringing it back to neutral from overweight, which we kept for the whole of 2019.
That's interesting. Now, I'm reading between the lines, Wei, so feel free to correct me, but the fact that you're kind of pulling away a little bit from U.S. equities, you like emerging market equities, and you see a little bit of a global growth inflection, that all tells me that perhaps you're quite positive on China in 2020. Am I right in thinking that?
We do think that the better trade headlines should support Chinese asset performance, equities and bonds in 2020. Now, having said that, given heightened uncertainty, what's going on in Hong Kong and headlines, trade headlines, whilst it looks a bit better, we could also take a step back before we take a step forward. We think that better entry point could be around the corner, but definitely we are becoming more constructive on Chinese assets, but also emerging market Asia that have been lagging for 2019. We think that there is room for them to catch up.
What about European stocks? I mean, there's been problems along the way, heaven knows. In 2020, do you see any attraction there?
Well, European equities have really been a standout exposure in that it has the greatest dislocation between performance and positioning flow last year. So last year, across index mutual funds, fund ETF and active funds. There has been $100 billion coming out of European equities, and yet the performance has been really, really good. So recognizing the fact that there's a big gap, but performance has already come through, we're actually moderating our conviction in European equities in order to fund those upgrades that I talked about, which is emerging market equities and Japanese equities.
What is it, therefore, that's made you a little bit less positive on the US? Is it simply the fact that the Fed is not going to be as stimulative as it was in 2019, or is it that you're actually concerned about the US consumer, or just relatively you think the rest of the world is going to catch up and do better, as it were?
I would think it's the latter, i.e. that we don't actually think that US equities are up for a challenging year. Despite political headline and uncertainty around electoral calendar, the election year tends to be a good year for US equity performance. But we do think that given the cyclical upturn that we pick up in terms of the growth picture, there are better places to get exposure to that. And that is emerging market equities that have been actually underperforming versus their US counterpart for the whole of 2019.
What about the changes in things like ESGs and moving into areas of concern about environmental issues and how that's affecting the portfolios, which we've heard quite a lot about in the last few months? How do you see that playing into 2020?
We have seen flows multiplying into ESG exposures versus their standard benchmark counterpart, and also versus prior years, driven actually mostly by institutional clients and also by European investors. So here Europe is actually leading the US in that charge. We definitely see this direction of travel being very unmistakable, and we see greater push and pull factors leading to greater adoption for ESG exposure. Now, having said it, it is very important to have a standard classification of what we mean by ESG, because it means different things to different people, and we see greater room for clarification in this space in 2020.
Great to have you with us this morning. Wei Li, head of iShares EMEA investment strategy, with us in the London studio. What is a risk-off day, Roger? European equities still in the red. The Stock 600 down some 0.7%, almost an hour into the equity market open here in Europe. And after hitting records yesterday, US stocks look like they're going to open lower as well. Nasdaq futures down more than 1%. S&P and Dow futures closely following.
Yeah, definitely a sense of concern and perhaps foreboding about what happened overnight in Baghdad, what it might mean. Coming up, Anna Edwards takes over the next hour of Daybreak Europe. She's joined by Janet Mui, global economist at Cazenove Capital. You can listen back to a selection of our best interviews at BloombergRadio.com or on your Bloomberg Business app. This is Daybreak Europe. This is Bloomberg.
Why do so many...
What if your email let you see a project's entire history and not just the messages sent to you? What if everyone else on your team could see it as well? Then it wouldn't be email at all. Move communication from inboxes to channels in Slack. Instead of seeing a partial set of messages about a project, everyone in Slack sees exactly the same thing and moves work forward faster. Slack. Choose a better way to work. Get started at slack.com.
Peoples of London, don't be like Sergey, slaving Monday to Friday, then so frazzled by weekend, you no cook Sunday lunch. You need me, Alexander, to save the day.
Oh, so Sunday lunch means meerkat meals?
Exactly. Get 2 for 1 on food with meerkat meals at your local favorites, like Rusty Bike Indian Kitchen. When you buy through Compare the Market.
For purchase, app only, 2 for 1 on selected food, participating restaurants, a la carte only, Sunday to Thursday, T's and C's and exclusions apply.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip
Follow
Bayless.
and TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
Today at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
External pressure is going to be an opportunity for reform in China. I think liquidity more generally across financial markets is an issue and a concern.
The Spanish banks in particular are in a much better place than they were 5 years ago.
It wouldn't be great to have a drawn-out trade conflict with the US or indeed with anybody else.
I've never been one to prophesy where sterling will be, and you're a madman if you think you can.
Bloomberg Daybreak Europe on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning from London. I'm Anna Edwards. You're listening to Daybreak Europe live on London DAB Digital Radio. Welcome to the programme, the second trading day of the year, and it is a Friday. But European equity markets certainly being hit by negative sentiment today, coming through from geopolitical concerns. So we see the Stoxx 600 in Europe down by 0.7%. No surprise that we get that risk-off reaction in equity markets, in risk assets, as a result of the US airstrike that killed a top Iranian commander overnight. So we turn risk-off in the Asian session. Asian equities coming off their highs, but not really moving decidedly to the downside. But European equity markets certainly have picked up on the negative side of things, and we are, as I say, down by 0.8%. The FTSE 100 a little different, down by around 0.5%, so cushioned a little bit because of exposure to oil stocks, which have been benefiting, of course, from a higher oil price. The CAC 40 down 0.6%, and the Xetra DAX down 1.4%. So in terms of the sector picture, we see oil stocks gaining as a result of the same geopolitical tensions which have pushed oil prices higher. So Brent is up by 3% overnight, 3.3%. It was up more than 4% earlier on. 68.46 is where we trade on the Brent price per barrel of oil. So that's been the predominant mover to the upside, the oil price. But elsewhere, we've seen moves to the downside in equity markets, as you would expect, and travel and leisure taking the brunt of that. And we see US futures also pointing lower. We see NASDAQ futures in particular down by 1.1%, given we came off new all-time highs on the S&P yesterday, and tech stocks, individual tech stocks, tech names touching new all-time highs on the NASDAQ. So all of that very much in focus. A little bit of profit taking expected at the start of the US trading day. A bit of breaking news just coming through on the Bloomberg. Commerzbank buys a block of Comdirect shares from Petrus Advisors. That's just turned into a red headline across the Bloomberg, so we'll look for developments around that story. Not much to check in with in terms of the FX markets, or not a great deal. We did see some flight into the Japanese yen as a result of the geopolitical news flow overnight, but the dollar is fairly flat this hour. We do have the pound a little bit weaker against the dollar, now down to 131, so down 0.3%. It seems the first couple of days of the European trading week, year, decade, we've seen a reassessment perhaps of the recent strength of sterling and whether that should and can be sustained later on in 2020. So that's a quick look at the markets. Let's talk about where we are with our first guest this morning. The risk-on sentiment that kicked off 2020 has taken a backseat today as investors digest the US airstrike on one of Iran's most powerful generals. Havens have rallied and oil is surging, as I pointed out, as Iran's supreme leader has vowed severe retaliation. For more on what this means for markets, let's bring in Janet Mui, global economist at Cazenove Capital. Global economist, but with expertise that seem to stretch far beyond just the economist brief then, Janet. Let me ask you about the flight we see to haven assets. Does that seem sensible, the buying of gold, the buying of yen at this point, as we wait to see what kind of escalation we get in the Middle East?
I think that's sensible. I think, gold performs well in a low interest rate and negative yielding rates environment. And recently we have seen a slightly weaker dollar, which also favors gold. And now we had this airstrike, which potentially can escalate the tension in the Middle East and the tension between US and Iran. So that is a big deal. And I think it's sensible for investors to build up the positions on gold, which so far has proved to be a good diversifier in times of stress and geopolitical risk.
Yes, and I suppose we're used to seeing oil prices spike at times of geopolitical risk and stress, and that certainly happens often in the Middle East. But as we know from the September attack on the Saudi infrastructure on the oil markets, things are different now, aren't they, in terms of the role that the United States plays and the amount of spare capacity that there is in the market. So we've learned a lot about whether these spikes higher in oil prices are sustainable. What are your thoughts on oil?
So I think the most recent example is the Saudi's facility attack, and we did see oil spike temporarily for a couple of days, but then it didn't sustain. And it's hard to compare the two situations because this time is really a potential escalation in the tension in the whole region, and it's the tension versus US and Iran, and they already said that they will retaliate. So it's hard to compare. But then after all, I think that oil prices may continue to be elevated for a period of time, but the U.S. is now the biggest oil producer in the world. So I think that marginal supply from the U.S. shale oil can potentially provide cushion to the oil prices spike. So I'm not sure if that rally can actually sustain.
Yeah, and so the sector reaction that we see to that oil price rally might also, I suppose, not be sustained. So today we see oil majors trading higher in London. We see travel and leisure stocks, airlines in particular, under pressure because of higher oil prices. So I guess we look to see any development there. I suppose US futures, US markets did look vulnerable because we've touched new all-time highs just last night on the S&P. So is that the reason that we see equity markets called quite severely lower at the start of US trade, down by more than 1% on E-mini futures?
Yeah, I think so. Investors have turned much more optimistic in the fourth quarter last year. We've seen a strong rally. I've seen a center rally and into the new year. And I think investors are taking this opportunity to take some profits off the table, I think. I think they need to see further de-escalation of the situation and improvement in economic fundamentals to come back into the market. So I think this reaction from the markets, I think, is sensible.
So your assessment of the US economy then right now, because we have this expectation, markets seem to have an expectation that the Fed, or investors don't think the Fed is going to move on interest rates in 2020, and we'll see some pricing in markets sort of around and about there. Do you think that the US economy is in what the Fed calls a good place right now? That is the mantra that we've heard often.
Yeah, from the economic data, I think so far the U.S. economy is in a good shape. In particular, the labor market is undoubtedly very strong. And also the housing market is seeing a lot of momentum given the low interest rates. And the only weaker area are the industrial sectors. That is weak. And I think that would start to recover in 2020 because of the trade deal. So the whole anti-global trade environment should be a bit better. But I think, going into an election year, we typically see slower capital expenditure this year, so that could offset some of that stronger activity from the consumer. So overall speaking, we're still seeing a modest US growth environment. We're not going to see like significant rebound of sorts.
And how much what does the European growth picture look like for you?
So 2019 was a difficult year for the European economy. I mean, all the markets, obviously, but for the economy because of the cyclical exposed trade sector. And also the auto sector has been a hit as well. And I think that headwind is going to temporarily remove in 2020 because of the trade deal that's going to be signed by US and China on January the 15th. That's going to lift sentiment. And we're already seeing leading indicators of European economy starting to pick up into the end of last year. So I think that's pretty positive. But ultimately, I think Europe is going to be continually confronted by just modest and slow growth just because of, the structural headwinds.
And because of trade tensions between the US and China, no doubt.
Yeah, I think because Europe is more focused on the industrial sector and, say, the auto sector, I think it's going to be structurally impacted. And also the trade, cyclical is going to be improved, but I don't think there will be a strong rebound because it's only a phase one trade deal. I don't think investors are complacent that there will be a comprehensive resolution. So I think that uncertainty will persist. It's going to be better, but not significantly better.
Okay. Thanks, Janet. Thanks for joining us. Happy New Year to
Happy
you.
New Year.
Janet Murray, global economist at Cazenove Capital. Let's take a break from the business news flow and check in on the latest global news headlines. Here's Bloomberg's Leanne Gerrans.
Good morning, Anna. In Australia, authorities have declared a state of emergency and ordered thousands of tourists to evacuate before extreme conditions over the weekend. The death toll has now climbed to 20. From Sydney, Bloomberg's Ed Johnson reports.
Holidaymakers have been told to get out of a 350-kilometre strip of coastline that runs from Nowra, about 3 hours south of Sydney, right down to the border of Victoria State. The fires have killed 10 people in the two states this week alone, and pressure is building on Prime Minister Scott Morrison over his handling of the crisis. In Sydney, Ed Johnson, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Carlos Ghosn is distancing his family from his dramatic escape from Japan. The fallen automotive giant said his wife Carol and other family members played no part in his escape to Lebanon. The statement, made through a PR firm, is the first comment he's made since fleeing Tokyo earlier this week. He said he's ready to communicate with the media freely as soon as next week. Crossing over to Europe, Spain is set to finally get a new government. That's after the acting Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez persuaded a Catalan separatist party to help him take office for a second term. Esquerra Republica agreed to abstain in a confidence vote in Parliament, giving Sanchez the numbers he needs to form a socialist-led coalition. And finally, here in the UK, Boris Johnson's top advisor says he wants to recruit weirdos and misfits as part of a drive to overhaul the UK government. Bloomberg's Sebastian Salek reports.
Dominic Cummings says he's seeking an unusual set of people with different skills and backgrounds to work in Downing Street. Hinting at a wider restructuring of the civil service, he says profound problems exist with the current process of high-level decision-making. In his 3,000-word blog, Cummings also said Brexit requires changes to how the UK makes decisions. In London, I'm Sebastian Salek, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Anna.
Thanks very much, Leanne. Now with your morning sports news, here's Colin Besley.
Liverpool are 13 points clear at the top of the Premier League once again this morning. The leaders got a 2-0 victory at home to Sheffield United. Jurgen Klopp's side have now gone a year unbeaten in the top flight, but he insists there are two reasons why they're not celebrating.
It's really an intense period of the year, so it's not like somebody wants to go out tonight and have a few drinks, so they're all happy when they're in bed. And because this player wants to do better, knows that he has to do better in this or this situation.
Wayne Rooney captained Derby as the Championship side secured back-to-back wins for the first time this season. The former England striker played in the centre of midfield on his debut, setting up the first goal in their 2-1 win at home to Barnsley. Elsewhere, Swansea climbed back into the playoff spots with a 1-0 victory over Charlton. England have fitness doubts over fast bowler Jofra Archer going into day one of the second cricket test with South Africa. He's struggling with an elbow injury ahead of the start of play in Cape Town this morning. Opening batsman Rory Burns has been ruled out for the rest of the series after suffering ankle ligament damage during a football warm-up session. Captain Joe Root wants his players to stamp their authority on the contest when they have the chance.
I think the most important thing we've got to harness is not waiting to be on the back foot. Let's try and do that from the outset. And a big challenge for the group this week is to try and, once we get in a position like 100 for 5 or 150 for 3 like we were in the last game, let's really make that count.
And third place is up for grabs in the Rugby Union Premiership tonight. A big victory for either Sale or Harlequins in their match in Salford would move them within a point of second place Northampton.
Thanks very much to Colin Besley for that. Let's get up to date on US sports now. Here's Pete Fox.
From the NFL, still no official word on the status of Jason Garrett with the Cowboys, but sources are saying Jerry Jones and the organization will be moving on. Hardwood in Dallas, Mavs post a 123-111 victory over the Nets, who've now dropped 4 in a row. Spencer Dinwiddie with 19, Luka Doncic on top of the scorer's sheet with 31 points. And from the night on the ice, tight decisions everywhere. Blue Jackets edging the Bruins in overtime 2-1. Devils down the Islanders at the Nassau Coliseum by the same score. Nico Hischier with the game winner. Sharks get past the Pens in overtime 3-2. Brent Burns netting the winner. And the Rangers let one slip in Calgary to the Flames 4-3. I'm Pete Fox. That's your Bloomberg NBC World Sports Update.
Pete, thanks very much for that. Still ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe. Back to the story of China suspending a tie-up between the Shanghai and London stock exchanges. It's one that we covered yesterday. As we broke in the last hour, a China regulator has denied that there's been any halt to the Shanghai-London Connect. So we'll get to the latest news flow on this and pick up on the opinion of one of our columnists. This is Bloomberg.
Message and data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at babbel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
Inovalon is a leading provider of cloud-based platforms empowering data-driven healthcare. Leveraging deep connectivity, the data of billions of medical events, and advanced analytics, Inovalon empowers the achievement of improved clinical outcomes and financial performance for thousands of health insurance companies, hospitals, doctors, pharmacies, and pharmaceutical companies, and the millions of patients they serve every day. Inovalon. Data has a story to tell. We give it a voice. Learn more at Inovalon.com.
Imagine being fired because of who you love. Imagine being denied medical treatment because of who you marry. Imagine being evicted because of who you are. Millions of Americans don't have to imagine this. They have to live it. Because in 31 states, it's legal to discriminate against LGBT people. Get the facts at beyondido.org. Brought to you by the Gill Foundation and the Ad Council.
Influential Conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Sherry Ann.
Joining us now is Mainstay Capital Management founder, CEO, and chief investment strategist David Kudlat. We are seeing a bit more calm in the repo markets. The Fed, of course, injecting more than $240 billion or so into the system. But what happens once that starts to run off? This is supposed to be temporary liquidity, no?
Well, it's supposed to be temporary liquidity. But if you look at what Kathleen, look at everything she covered there, and she covered a lot of ground. And it's important not only in terms of what's happening to rates or what the Fed is doing, but it's important for those of us investing, or me as an investment strategist, because the Fed has had such an impact on the financial markets. It's not just about what happens with interest rate policy. They could be on hold for the remainder of this year. They could be on hold until the election, which is probable. I think they try to get interest rate cuts out of the way in 2019 so that they can be on hold and not seen biased either way relative to the upcoming presidential elections coming later this year. But we have liquidity that is coming into the system. And whether, we've referred to it as not QE, but it's a quantity of money coming into the financial system that has buoyed stocks.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters in London, I'm Sandra Kilhoff with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. Now, oil is rallying after Iran has promised a severe retaliation to a U.S. airstrike in Baghdad that killed a top Iranian commander. Risk-off sentiment very much boosting havens. Oil futures in New York and London surging 3.5%. WTI above $63 a barrel. Brent well above $68 a barrel. Gold gaining more than 1% to $1,546 a troy ounce. Treasuries also reacting. We're currently seeing the 10-year yield down 6 basis points to 1.82%. 10-year bund yields down 5 basis points to negative 27. 10-year gilt yields sliding 4 basis points to 75 basis points. That move into safety also boosting yen bids. Dollar yen gaining the most in 2 months, currently at 107.9, up 0.6%. The greenback also ticking higher, up 0.1%. The Aussie and Kiwi dollars both selling off, down 0.7%. Traders there shorting those currencies. Here in Europe, we're seeing trading. Sterling weaker for a third day in a row, currently down 0.4% below 131 at 1.309. The euro down at 111. Stock markets also selling off. The Stock 600 currently down 0.9%. The FTSE falling 0.5%. Germany's DAX sliding 1.5%. US futures also pointing to a lower open. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Garrins with more on what's going on around the world.
Sandra, thank you. Turkey's parliament has authorised deploying troops to support Libya's internationally recognised administration against rival forces. The Libyan government is battling militias backed by Russian mercenaries, Egypt and the United Arab Emirates. The White House says President Trump spoke to Turkish leader Erdogan about the move, warning him that the foreign interference is complicating the situation. Now to southern Africa. Zambia is on the brink of famine due to climate change. According to experts, the country is wrestling with a devastating drought caused by changing weather patterns. The UN is calling for urgent action as temperatures in parts of southern Africa are expected to rise by twice the global average as a result of climate change. And finally, tennis player Nick Kyrgios will donate 200 Aussie dollars for each AC hits in events held in Australia this month to help those affected by the bushfires. He's calling on Tennis Australia to host a fundraising exhibition. Kyrgios is one of the leading servers on the ATP Tour, averaging 16 aces per match last year. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Garrins. This is Bloomberg.
Bloomberg Opinion, informed perspectives, and expert data-driven commentary on breaking news.
It is 9:20 in the city. Time to check in with Bloomberg Opinion. And we're joined today by opinion columnist Nisha Gopalan, who's been writing about China's supposed move to suspend a tie-up between the Shanghai and London stock exchanges. So yesterday we brought you a report by other media that there'd been a suspension, a temporary suspension to the Shanghai-London Connect. Now it seems that Chinese regulators are denying any halt. So let's get to Nisha Gopalan. And before we get your thoughts, Nisha, on the ongoing development of these kind of stock connects, I want to ask you about what the latest is here. Do we know exactly what is happening with this connect?
Well, today China denied that the link had been halted between the two. But then, in a way, you look at the proof is in the pudding, right? I mean, it was launched in June, and ever since then, there's only been one Chinese company listed in London, and no British companies listed in Shanghai. The whole idea behind this link was that you'd have Chinese companies list in London and British or London listed companies list in Shanghai, and it would be a two-way street. Instead, it's sort of what I've said is it's become a one-way road with just one company. So so from what we can see, if it's halted, it's been a painless halt anyway.
Right.
It's just one company.
You make the point, Nisha, in your article that it's always easier to put up a barrier on an empty road than a busy highway, and this certainly has been more empty road than busy highway. But there was one company, as you say. What do you think has meant that fewer Chinese businesses have decided to take up this opportunity and no British businesses or London-listed businesses have?
Well, the thing is, this is a very political link. And if you look at the one company that has listed Huatai Securities, it's a Chinese brokerage and it's owned by the Chinese government. The other two companies that were said to be listing and planning to list in London, China Pacific Insurance Group and CDIC Power, a power generation company, they're also both Chinese government-owned companies. So it's very clear that the Chinese government has a say in who is listing. So it's not like a British company deciding to list somewhere. And
This was unveiled, as you say, it was a political exercise, I suppose, and it was. I remember at the time, back in middle of 2019, so middle of last year, we had Philip Hammond, then the UK Chancellor, hailing this as a groundbreaking initiative which will deepen global connectivity. And when we saw that aborted bid for the London Stock Exchange, there were commentators at the time saying, "Look, actually, it's things like Stock Connect that should be uniting these trading platforms rather than outright M&A." Do we conclude that Stock Connect is is it failing?
Well, from the looks of it, yes, it's failing with only one company. I mean, there were rumors that HSBC would be listing in Shanghai, and in fact, I think HSBC talked about it a couple of years ago. But all these months later, and there are no signs of HSBC going public in Shanghai. And if anything, it's sort of in the bad books at the moment of Beijing, because it provided information that led to the arrest of the CFO of Huawei. So I think, it's an easy link to halt when there's only one company. Although, of course, China's,
Yeah, I suppose the initial argument for getting involved with this, if you're a London-listed business, you might want to tap into liquidity available in Chinese markets or investor appetite for Western stocks in Chinese markets to that investor pool there. Maybe there's details behind the way that this functions, because there are other Connect systems that seem to have more success.
Right. The other Connect system that has more success is the Hong Kong Shanghai Connect and the Hong Kong Shenzhen Connect. But the difference between those Connects and what's happening in London is those Connects allow a mainland investor to trade Hong Kong stocks and a Hong Kong investor to trade mainland stocks or Chinese stocks. But in this Connect, there was no cross-border trading happening. All that happened was a Chinese company went to London, got listed, and the idea was that British investors would trade in it, and then there was nothing on the other way.
Okay, Nisha, thanks very much. Thanks for your thoughts. Bloomberg Opinion columnist Nisha Gopalan. You can read more on this and other stories from Bloomberg Opinion at bloomberg.com/opinion and on the terminal by typing OPIN GO. When we come back, we'll get you up to date with the geopolitical developments overnight in the Middle East. Plenty more to come on the U.S. airstrike near Baghdad.
With the Bloomberg Business of Sports Report, I'm Michael Barr. The basketball world is mourning the death of former NBA Commissioner David Stern. Stern spent 30 years as commissioner and oversaw its growth into a global power. Stern died after suffering a brain hemorrhage December 12th. By the time he left in 2014, a league that had struggled for a foothold had grown into a more than $5 billion a year industry. LeBron James put Stern at the same level with the man who created the game.
I mean, obviously it's bittersweet. The bitter part of it is we lost a great visionary. I think him and Dr. James Naismith was two of the most important people for the game of basketball.
Milwaukee Bucks forward Giannis Antetokounmpo.
Once he said my name, my life changed. My family's life changed. And a lot of people love him, man. He's changed a lot of people's life.
David Stern was 77. With the Bloomberg Business of Sports Report, I'm Michael Barr.
Are you interested in a challenging and exciting career? One where you can be part of solving complex challenges across industries and geographies? Bloomberg's ever-expanding technology, data, news, and media services foster innovation, empower clients, and offer nearly limitless opportunities for career growth. Visit Bloomberg.com/careers today to view our current job opportunities. Bloomberg LP is an equal opportunity employer. The address once again is Bloomberg.com/careers.
In today's volatile markets, investors need resilient portfolios to help handle the pressure. Through decades of expansions and recessions and changing interest rates, clients have turned to PIMCO to help them stay on course, no matter what course markets take. PIMCO, active fixed income solutions that aim to give investors an edge. All investments contain risk and may lose value. Investing in the bond market is subject to risks. Consult your investment professional prior to making an investment decision.
Why has J.D. Power...
Hi, I'm back. I just set a personal best on my park run. Feels great.
That's lovely, Mike. I think you've earned the right to put all the bins out.
Hey?
With Vitality Life Insurance, you get properly rewarded when you're active. In fact, you could save over £730 every year in discounts and rewards from our partners. Join over 1 million customers. Just search Vitality Life. Vitality. Positively different. Annual savings available with certain plans and are dependent on members' usage of rewards available. Terms and conditions apply.
On the goal line, scores! He takes it home!
Hockey fans, the 2019-20 NHL season is here.
Here's Pietrangelo, he scores!
And you can hear the action live on TuneIn Premium.
Gonna move, hit a shot, he scores!
From regular season action to the All-Star Game and through the Stanley Cup in June. Hear the home and away call for every game, for every team live. At home or on the go, never miss a game with the NHL on TuneIn Premium.
Upgrade today. To LeBron, slam dunk.
The NBA is on TuneIn Premium. Each week, TuneIn picks an NBA game you just can't miss.
Hard pulls back, trying to make it 11-2.
The Pelicans are taking on the Lakers in Los Angeles for the first time since the big off-season trade, sending Anthony Davis to LA. Today, the Pelicans are at the Lakers. Tip-off is at 10:30 p.m. Eastern. Search NBA on TuneIn to follow your favorite NBA team today.
Want TuneIn to remind you when the big NFL game is about to get underway? Be sure notifications are allowed on your phone and search NFL on the TuneIn app. Find the game you want to hear under events and tap Notify Me. We'll let you know exactly when it's time to listen in for kickoff.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip Bayless.
Follow and tune in on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Happy New Year. It's a new year and time for you to explore new podcasts on TuneIn. Exciting new podcasts like How I Built This from NPR.
Show about innovators, entrepreneurs, idealists, stories behind the movements built.
The Rachel Maddow Show from MSNBC.
Good evening. Thanks for being with us. Happy holidays. Congressman.
What's Next from Slate. Start your new year with these podcasts and more. Just search podcasts on TuneIn today.
Casting live to London on DAB Digital Radio, to New York, Bloomberg 1130, to Washington DC, Bloomberg 99.1, to Boston, Bloomberg 106.1, to San Francisco, Bloomberg 960, and around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
It is 9:30 here in London, 10:30 if you're in Paris or Berlin. I'm Anna Edwards. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe. We check the markets for you every 15 minutes and we get straight to the breaking news across the Bloomberg. So let's get first to the markets then, because that's where we're seeing big reaction to geopolitical developments overnight. We'll get further analysis on what's going on in Iraq between the US and Iran shortly, but the fallout from that US airstrike on an Iranian commander, killing an Iranian commander, is certainly to be seen in these markets. Investors fearing, pricing in to some extent, retaliation by the Iranians. So the Stock 600 down by 0.7%, the FTSE 100 down 0.4%, the CAC 40 weaker by 0.5%, and the Xetra DAX down by 1.4%. It was interesting that in Asia, we're of course without Japan, so that means we don't see the volume that we normally would see through the Asian session. We did see a little bit of response to the geopolitical developments. We saw that any earlier gains were lost, but we didn't see a great deal of selling on Asian equity markets, despite the overnight news flow, which perhaps was a surprise, and it's been left to European markets to pick up on the negativities and the risk-off mood. Also, US futures suggest that US equity markets will be very much in a risk-off place. We have E-mini futures down by just over 1%, NASDAQ futures down by 1.25%, and of course worth remembering that we're coming off new all-time highs on the S&P, and many tech stocks hitting new all-time highs for their own individual share prices in yesterday's session. So with that as the backdrop, perhaps US equity markets looking ever so vulnerable. Let's talk about where we are on oil prices, because it is the oil price move that we first saw the expression of the geopolitical tension in the markets. So we see oil prices up by over 4% in the overnight session, but now pairing those gains up by around 3.5% on Brent at 68.62. So watching to see if we do manage to go above the $70 a barrel mark. We did see some reaction in FX markets as well, money going into gold, but also into the Japanese yen, just up by 0.5% on the Japanese yen against the US dollar. A little bit of dollar strength as well, though, more broadly, as the dollar is up by 0.1%, and the pound losing some ground for another day, down 0.5% at 130.80. That's a quick look at what we've got on these markets right now. Let's get to the root cause of all of this then, and that's the geopolitical tension between the US and Iran. Our top story, Iran's supreme leader has vowed severe retaliation after a US airstrike killed one of the Islamic Republic's most powerful generals. The market reaction was immediate, with Brent crude and WTI futures in both of those surging after the attack. For more on the story, we're joined now by Bloomberg senior international editor Jody Schneider. Jody, how significant is this action then, and what have we heard from the US side on this? Because we didn't hear much from President Trump until he tweeted a picture of a US flag.
That's right. This airstrike is the most significant escalation of tensions between Tehran and Washington, and in the whole region since the end of the Iraq War in 2011. This basically is this killed in this drone attack a very senior general in Iran, perhaps the second most powerful man in Iran after the supreme leader, the Ayatollah. And what we heard from the U.S. Is that this was a strike that was ordered by the president, by President Trump. The Pentagon sending out a statement saying that at the direction of the president, the U.S. military took decisive action. They called it defensive action, saying that they wanted to protect personnel abroad, that they thought that this general was actively planning to attack American diplomats and service members in Iraq. Of course, this airstrike and the death of this general is really leading to concerns and escalating concerns that the U.S. and Iran could be drawn into an armed confrontation that could also pull in other countries and destabilize the region.
Yes, and so we've seen some reaction from Iran, as you might expect, given, as you said, this could be the second most powerful, or have been the second most powerful person in Iran. I've certainly seen him described as such. We heard from Khomeini talking about severe retaliation. We've heard from Rouhani talking about the action they may take. What is expected now from Iran?
Yeah, so we did hear those statements, both from the supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, vowing to avenge this killing. And we also heard from President Rouhani about saying that they'll take revenge, and the U.S. bearing responsibility. So these are all very significant kinds of statements. And, of course, we can only wait and see what happens. There's also the question of Baghdad and Iraq being drawn into this, as this did happen in Baghdad. There will be strong pressure, we're hearing from analysts, that the Iranian regime will be under strong pressure to strike back, and to strike back soon, given that this was ordered by President Trump. And this is an escalation in a series of episodes that have strained already worsening relations between Iran and the U.S.
Yes, and I know that the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad, of course, has been the center of violence recently, and we saw reports that any U.S. citizens there had been told to leave. What has been the response of the broader political actors in the United States then, from Congress, from those running for president in 2020, later this year in November? Jody, what have we heard from more broadly from the political establishment in the US?
Yeah, so we have heard from a few of the candidates, a few of the leading candidates for the Democratic nomination, Joe Biden and Elizabeth Warren. Joe Biden said, while no one in the U.S. is mourning the death of this general, at the same time that this was making a volatile situation much worse. And that's essentially what we heard from Elizabeth Warren. We've also heard largely from Democratic members of Congress, while on the one hand saying that, along the lines of Joe Biden's comments, but also that they're concerned that this was done without the knowledge of Congress, and that if there is going to be an actual military intervention, a declaration of war, that needs to come from Congress. So I think that's something we're going to hear more about in coming days, why Congress wasn't informed.
Okay, thanks very much, Jody, for your assessment. Bloomberg Senior International Editor Jody Schneider. Let's get up to date on the latest global news headlines then. Here's Bloomberg's Leanne Garris.
Good morning, Anna. Thousands of people stranded on the east coast of Australia due to wildfires have been evacuated by the country's Navy. A state of disaster has been declared in Victoria, where residents had to flee to beaches to avoid the flames. 2 ships are now starting an operation to take people to safety. Prime Minister Scott Morrison has praised the community's response.
It being done in a very coordinated way, in a very calm way, reduces the risk of injury and threatening people's safety. And I was pleased to see today even the orderly way in which people are leaving the area, being patient in the queues, and I think that's extraordinarily helpful.
Crossing over to Europe, Spain is finally set to get a new government. Acting Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez persuaded a Catalan separatist party to help him take office for a second term. That means another socialist coalition and the first proper government since last March. A final vote in the Spanish Parliament is expected on January the 7th. Here in the UK, Boris Johnson's top advisor is looking for weirdos and misfits as part of a drive to reform the UK government. In a 3,000-word blog post Post. Dominic Cummings says he's seeking an unusual set of people with different skills and backgrounds to work in Downing Street, hinting at a wider restructuring of the civil service. He said there are profound problems at the core of how the British state makes decisions. And finally, governments across Asia are taking measures to secure their borders against a mysterious pneumonia outbreak in central China. Bloomberg's Samson Ellis has all the details.
Airports in Taiwan, Singapore and Hong Kong are bringing in or intensifying temperature checks for all passengers, especially those from the Chinese city of Wuhan, where dozens of people have fallen ill. The cases have been traced back to a fresh produce market that sold birds, pheasants and snakes, along with other wildlife, triggering worries about the potential jump of an unknown virus to humans in Taipei. Samson Ellis, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg. Anna.
Leanne, thanks very much. Now with your morning sports news, here's Colin Besley.
Liverpool are 13 points clear at the top of the Premier League once again this morning. The leaders got a 2-0 victory at home to Sheffield United. Jurgen Klopp's side have now gone a year unbeaten in the top flight, but he insists there are two reasons why they're not celebrating.
It's really an intense period of the year, so it's not like there's somebody wants to go out tonight and have a few drinks, so they're all happy when they're in bed. And because this or this player want to do better, knows that he has to do better in this or this situation.
Wayne Rooney captained Derby as the Championship side secured back-to-back wins for the first time this season. The former England striker played in the centre of midfield on his debut, setting up the first goal in their 2-1 win at home to Barnsley. And third place is up for grabs in the Rugby Union Premiership tonight. A big victory for either Sale or Harlequins in their match in Salford would move them within a point of second place Northampton.
Thanks very much to Colin for that. Let's get up to date with US sports. Here's Pete Fox.
From the night on the ice in the NHL, tight decisions everywhere you look north of the border. The Flames edging the Rangers 4-3. Kakko, Hedl, and Trouba with the goals. Sharks prevail in Pittsburgh over the Penguins 3-2. Brent Burns got the winner in overtime. Devils take care of the Islanders at the Nassau Coliseum 2-1. Nico Hischier had the game winner. And the Bruins fall at TD Garden to the Jackets 2-1 in overtime. Hardwood in Dallas, Mavs post a 123-111 victory over the Nets, who've now dropped 4 in a row. Spencer Dinwiddie with 19, Luka Doncic on top of the scorer's sheet with 31 points. I'm Pete Fox, that's your Bloomberg.
Adopt US Kids presents What to Expect When You're Expecting a Teenager. Learning the lingo.
Jelly. Jelly adjective. Jelly is a shorter, better way to say jealous. As in, Chloe, I am like so jelly of your unicorn phone case.
You don't have to speak teen to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same. Visit adoptuskids.org. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt US Kids, and the Ad Council.
Are you one of those people who thinks it's okay to drive stoned? I mean, what's the worst that can happen? You end up driving below the speed limit? It's no big deal, right? Wrong. The truth is, your reaction times slow way down when you're high. You not only put yourself in danger, but everyone around you. Talk about a buzzkill. Stop kidding yourself. It's not okay to drive high. If you've been using marijuana in any form, do not get behind the wheel. If you feel different, you drive different. Drive high, get a DUI. Paid for by NHTSA.
Rich is just a really good guy. The term good egg isn't enough to describe him. He's also certified organic and free range. Rich puts the cap back on everything. The toothpaste, the olive oil, the shampoo, everything. He lets his 10-year-old nephew beat him at virtual tennis, even though he can straight up slay his 10-year-old nephew in virtual tennis. When the toilet paper is running low, Rich replaces the roll on the actual holder, not just on the back of the toilet. Rich is texting and driving. Rich? No. What are you doing, Rich? I was just telling everyone how great you are. Texting and driving makes good people look bad. Visit StopTextStopWrecks.org. A public service announcement brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
Asset managers. I used to be a bit of a rubbish sleeper. I'd toss and turn all night, and somehow I could never find the comfy bit of the mattress. It was a proper nightmare. That's what brought me here. Testing mattresses in the Witch Test Lab. We use a custom-made barrel rolling machine to simulate a decade's worth of use. And the mattresses that perform best are the only ones we recommend for your bedroom.
Which tests harder so you can buy smarter. Visit which.co.uk.
LeBron, slam dunk.
The NBA is on TuneIn Premium. Each week, TuneIn picks an NBA game you just can't miss.
Harden pulls back, trying to make it 11-2.
The Pelicans are taking on the Lakers in Los Angeles for the first time since the big off-season trade, sending Anthony Davis to LA. Today, the Pelicans are at the Lakers. Tip-off is at 10:30 p.m. Eastern. Search NBA on TuneIn to follow your favorite NBA team today.
This is not a commercial. This is a reminder. With TuneIn Premium, you could be listening to more music commercial-free. Get over 45 commercial-free music stations. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
Don't want to miss a second of the NFL playoffs? Set reminders with TuneIn to stay in sync with the postseason. Just make sure notifications are allowed on your phone and search for your team on the TuneIn app. Find the game you want to hear and tap Notify Me. We'll let you know exactly when live coverage begins. Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards, at the goal line, it's intercepted!
Listen live as the action unfolds or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught. It is in for the right side for the touchdown.
Search NFL today.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
Want to hear about the latest and greatest things to listen to on TuneIn? For reminders of the biggest live sports games, debates, and breaking news stories, follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to stay connected with the audio that matters to you.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Introducing a new podcast, ESPN Daily. When you want to go beyond your feed, when you want to get inside the score, when you want to get behind the highlight, there's ESPN Daily. Go deeper into the stories of the moment. Get the exclusive access and insider perspective that only ESPN can give you. ESPN Daily, hosted by me, Mina Kimes. Listen now to ESPN Daily on TuneIn.
We can't make traffic move faster during rush hour, but we can help you catch up on the news with TuneIn. With live around-the-clock news from MSNBC.
In the UK, they're significantly worse. When the president gets up to the podium...
CNBC and Fox News Talk.
The Fox News poll sizing up the race for 2020 found that each of the 5 top Democrats...
You can use your stop and go for good by staying in touch with the world. Search news to hear what's happening now.
Quick take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters in London, I'm Sandra Kilhoff with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. Now, oil is climbing after Iran promised a severe retaliation to a U.S. airstrike in Baghdad that killed a top Iranian commander. Risk-off sentiment boosting havens this morning. Oil futures in New York and London surging 3.5%. WTI above $63 a barrel. Brent well above $68 a barrel. Gold gaining 1 3/10% now at $1,550 a troy ounce. Treasuries also reacting to this news. The 10-year yield now down almost 7 basis points at 1.81%. 10-year bund yields currently down 6 basis points at negative 28. 10-year gilt yield sliding 6 basis points as well to 73 basis points. That move into safety also boosting yen bids. We're currently seeing dollar yen gaining the most in 2 months, now at 107.9, up 0.6%. The greenback also ticking higher, up 0.2%.
and Aussie and Kiwi dollars both selling off, down 0.7%. Traders there really shorting those currencies. Here in Europe, the Swedish krona falling almost 1%. Danske Bank strategists warning that they see a growth recession coming in Sweden. Meanwhile, sterling having another down day. That's the third day in a row, sliding 0.5% to one spot, 308 now. Stock markets also selling off. The Stock 600 currently down 0.8%. The FTSE falling 0.4%, and the DAX sliding 1.5% in Frankfurt. US futures also pointing lower. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Garrins with more on what's going on around the world.
Sandra, thank you. Carlos Ghosn is distancing his family from his dramatic escape from Japan. The fallen automotive giant said his wife Carol and other family members played no part in his escape to Lebanon. The statement, made through a PR firm, is the first comment he's made since fleeing Tokyo earlier this week. He says he's ready to communicate with the media freely as soon as next week. Austria's new government plans to push the boundaries of conventional economic energy and tax policies in a bid to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The Conservative People's Party and the environmentalist Greens have laid out their policy blueprint for their new coalition under Chancellor Sebastian Kurz. Their pledges include a range of measures to put the Alpine country on a path to become climate neutral by 2040. And finally, a series of new records for high temperatures were broken in the UK in 2019, concluding a record-breaking decade. That's according to the Met Office. 4 new UK records were set last year alone, including the highest winter and summer temperatures ever recorded. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Garrins. This is Bloomberg. Anna.
Leanne, I remember those hot days well, broadcasting outside Westminster, and I think what was the hottest day, but we were also there in the freezing cold as well, so we had plenty of balance.
Well, apparently 21.2 degrees Celsius was the hottest day in February last year.
Balmy. Now, let's talk about what's going on in US markets right now, and in fact, what is to come, because our colleagues in the US are getting ready for Bloomberg Daybreak, so let's check in with Nathan Hager. Good morning to you, Nathan. I look at US equity market futures, and for all three of the major markets, they point down by more than 1%.
Yeah, following European stocks, and after that U.S. airstrike that killed Iran's second most powerful man. And as Sandra mentioned, oil surging, havens rising, and a flight to safety. We're going to get the very latest on what's happening in the Middle East with Bloomberg's Rosalind Matheson. She joins us later in the show. And we'll look at the political implications of President Trump's decision to take out this leader with Brown University political scientist Wendy Schiller. Also today, we get the minutes from the Federal Reserve's December meeting. We'll preview that with John Sylvia of Dynamic Economic Strategy. And even with geopolitics front and center for markets this morning, 2020 could be a big year for big tech. We're going to get new year predictions on some of the FANG names with Gene Munster of Loop Ventures. He joins me and Karen Moscow for all that and much more coming up on Bloomberg Daybreak. Anna.
Yeah, we saw a big day for Apple, Alphabet, Microsoft, all closing at records in yesterday's session. We'll see what kind of pullback we get today. Thanks very much, Nathan. Bloomberg Daybreak is up next. Or if you're listening on London DAB Digital Radio, you'll hear Bloomberg Surveillance. Let's pick up on some of the themes we've just been discussing there with Nathan. Back to our top story. Iran's supreme leader has vowed severe retaliation after a US airstrike killed one of the Islamic Republic's most powerful generals. The market reaction was immediate, with Brent crude futures surging to levels not seen since the attacks on Saudi Arabia's infrastructure in September. Joining us now here in our London studio, James Bevan, CCLA Investment Management Chief Investment Officer. James, Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year to
you. We wake up this morning, though, with less than happy news flow in terms of the geopolitical developments overnight in the Middle East and the impact that's having on risk assets. Does it seem like appropriate action to boost holdings of havens, gold, the yen and the like right now?
I think it's probably an error insofar as I would anticipate that what we have observed in Iraq is a short-term issue. It will blow over, and I think the much more important macro trends are relating to liquidity and central bank action, and I am therefore anticipating that 2020 will be a strong year for risk assets, and going into low-risk or risk-free assets now I think would be an error.
That's interesting. So why do you think this is just going to be contained as sort of proxy versus proxy conflict in the region, rather than turning out to be any kind of full-blown escalation in violence, which could be more damaging to sentiment?
I think it is extremely difficult to tell how this pans out, and there are obviously myriad ways in which this can develop. But history suggests that military conflicts and political upheavals tend not to have a lasting impact on market valuation.
And we saw actually with the attack on the Saudi oil infrastructure just in September of last year that the surge in oil prices then was short-lived, because US producers to some extent came back into the market to supply. Is that what you would expect to see this time? It's a different oil market to, say, 20 years ago.
Yeah, it certainly is, and I would observe that we now have genuinely very competitive, sustainable and renewable energy sources, which we had not had before, and we have much less energy intensity in modern economies, so we have much less leverage to the shift in the price of oil in terms of the impact on GDP.
And so, James, you said that you expect to see a positive atmosphere for risk assets. So what is it that makes you so positive? A lot of guests would list a lot of concerns around global trade and the like. What is it that makes you relatively bullish then for 2020?
I would observe this is going to be the first year for a number where we will see a reasonably concerted approach to economic recovery from both central banks and governments. And this interplay of accommodative monetary policy and supportive fiscal policy will, I think, lead to a rush of cash into risk asset markets, driving up prices. And if you said to me, what is the biggest concern I have, it is the market becomes overstretched. It moves into bubble territory, at which point a correction is inevitable. And that, to me, is a far bigger challenge for market participation in the year ahead, rather than worrying about the earnings underpinnings, which I think are reasonably solid.
Okay, I mean, where do you think where are the contenders for 2020's bubble?
Well, I am projecting that fair value for the S&P 500 for end 2020 is at around 3,500 points. And last year we were talking about 3,100 for the end of 2019, 3,500 for the end of 2020. And of course we sailed through 3,100.
We're at 3,222.
Yeah, absolutely. And therefore we're halfway to 3,500 already. Now, beyond 3,500, I think that we begin to have to take far too much on trust in terms of the outlook for inflation, which is uncertain, and the forward progress of corporate earnings. So above 3,500, I would be beginning to want to trim positions.
So that's when valuations come into play. Let me pick up on, you said inflation there. I talked to a guest yesterday, Brendan Brown, who was concerned that he could smell inflation coming. Are you in that camp who sees inflation coming? Various drivers, perhaps the changing nature of globalization and digitalization, maybe the benefits of that have been reaped already, and now we enter an age of slightly higher inflation. Is that something you would ascribe to?
Well, I would certainly anticipate that we have seen the great charge of disinflation resulting from globalization and trade, but also new technology. So I agree that those two are now largely in the bag and are well anticipated. The big beast in the corner, which no one really wants to talk about, is evolving demographics, which are very hostile to rising inflation. In many economies where we have an aging population relative to the scale of the workforce, that's inherently disinflationary or deflationary. So I don't think that's going away anytime soon. The other big factor which has kept inflation very low is the number of zombie companies that continue to produce goods that nobody really wants to buy, but they hold down pricing. And that is a factor. There are some short-term concerns, inevitably, the principal one being wage growth, which in many economies is now beginning to accelerate. Lots of people have said the historic relationship between wages and generalised inflation is bust. I have to say, I think the signs of it is coming back.
Okay, and so lots to think about there. James, what is your top investment theme for 2020 then? You clearly see some upside in stocks, but what's your top theme?
It is to stick with quality and growth, and I know that's not popular because many people who are talking about growth want to buy cyclicals. I don't think we're going to get enough growth to justify supporting cyclicals. Equally, I don't think central banks are going to tighten in the face of rising inflation. So I think that the real bad boy in this is going to be for the bond market, because rising inflation and no central bank action means that bond yields look thoroughly overcooked.
Okay, one to keep an eye on. Thanks very much, James. Really good to see you. Happy New Year. James Bevan, CCLA Investment Management Chief Investment Officer, joining us here in our London studio. Coming up in the next hour, then, Daybreak with Nathan Hager and Karen Moscow from New York. Or if you're listening in London on DAB Digital Radio, you'll hear Bloomberg Surveillance, hosted by Tom Keane and Neera Chehich this morning. So plenty to look ahead to. No doubt they'll keep you abreast of all the latest developments in the Middle East. A top Iranian commander, of course, killed in a US airstrike on President Trump's orders. We've already seen response from the Iranian leadership. We will look for further developments there and market impact. This is Bloomberg.
Family properties and investments have been passed.
Start hearing more of what you want. Upgrade to TuneIn Premium and get over 45 commercial-free music stations, live commercial-free news, and every live NFL, MLB, NBA, and NHL game. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
Don't want to miss a second of the NFL playoffs? Set reminders with TuneIn to stay in sync with the postseason. Just make sure notifications are allowed on your phone and search for your team on the TuneIn app. Find the game you want to hear and tap Notify Me. We'll let you know exactly when live coverage begins.
Hello, I'm Nat Coombs from ESPN's The Nat Coombs Show, which admittedly is 1 out of 10 for original podcast name, but 10 out of 10 for NFL chat. Every week, we're dropping 4 episodes with an all-pro lineup of terrific guests, journalists, comedians, players, coaches, you name it, all getting you up to speed with everything gridiron. The Nat Coombs Show, American football, British accent. Add to your favorites and listen on TuneIn.
Introducing a new podcast, ESPN Daily. When you want to go beyond your feed, when you want to get inside the score, when you want to get behind the highlight, there's ESPN Daily. Go deeper into the stories of the moment. Get the exclusive access and insider perspective that only ESPN can give you. ESPN Daily, hosted by me, Mina Kimes. Listen now to ESPN Daily on TuneIn.
.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios, this is Bloomberg Daybreak for Friday, January 3rd, 2020. Coming up this hour.
Global stocks tumble after a U.S. airstrike kills Iran's top general.
This is a huge crisis. I'm not sure Donald Trump understands the implications of what he has unleashed.
Oil prices surge as tensions climb in the Middle East.
The market is not positioned for this event.
U.S. futures fall, gold climbs, and the yen strengthens.
The top Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden comments on the airstrike in Iraq. I'm Michael Barr. More ahead.
I'm John Stashower in sports. A 4th straight loss for the Nets. They fell in Dallas. The Rangers lost in Calgary at the Coliseum. The Devils topped the Islanders.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak. On Bloomberg 1130 New York. Bloomberg 99.1 Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 106.1 Boston. Bloomberg 960 San Francisco. Sirius XM 119. And around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
Good morning, I'm Karen Moscow.
And I'm Nathan Hager. Bloomberg Daybreak brought to you by SEI. Built on advanced technologies and 50 years of innovation, SEI offers asset managers a comprehensive and flexible operations outsourcing platform. Go to SEIC.com/IMS.
And U.S. stock futures and bond yields are tumbling after a U.S. airstrike killing one of Iran's most powerful generals. We'll have more on that in a moment, but first, 5:01 on Wall Street, and we check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures are down 35 points, Dow futures down 273, and NASDAQ futures down 114. The DAX in Germany is down 1.5%, CAC in Paris down 0.6%, and the FTSE 100 down 0.33%. 10-year Treasury up 16/32, yield 1.82%. 0.5%. Yield on the 2-year, 1.53%. NYMEX crude oil up 3.5% or $2.15 at $63.33 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 1.4% or $21.10 at $15.49.20 an ounce. The euro 1.1143 against the dollar and the yen 108.07. Nathan.
Well, Karen, it is risk off across global markets after that U.S. airstrike in Iraq killed one of Iran's most powerful generals. Let's get the very latest now from Bloomberg's Mark Mills.
Qasem Soleimani, the head of Iran's elite Quds force, was killed in an airstrike at Baghdad's International Airport, an attack the Pentagon says was ordered by President Trump. New Jersey Democratic Senator Cory Booker said Soleimani had American blood on his hands.
He's plotted, planned, and executed attacks on American citizens, American soldiers.
Soleimani was a huge figure in Iranian military and political affairs. The death of Soleimani heightened fears that rising tensions between the U.S. and Iran could lead to an armed confrontation. Mark Mills, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Mark, thank you. Those fears of an armed confrontation are well-founded, according to Barbara Slavin. She's senior fellow at the Atlantic Council and director of the Future of Iran Initiative.
You know, this is the worst it's been in 40 years, in my view. The worst it's been since Iran held American hostages at our embassy. This is a huge crisis. I'm not sure Donald Trump understands the implications of what he has unleashed. We have to see what happens in Iraq. How does the Iraqi government survive this? You know, it wasn't just Qasem Soleimani who was assassinated, but also a very prominent Iraqi, head of one of these militias and someone with a great deal of political power as well. We're going to see the ripples flowing out from this for a long time.
Iran's top leaders all condemn the attack, with Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei vowing to avenge Soleimani's death.
And global stocks fell immediately on word of the attack beginning in Asia. Here with more is Bloomberg's Selena Wang in our Beijing bureau. Good morning, Selena.
Good morning, Nathan and Karen. The risk-on sentiment that ushered in the new year took a hit as tensions flared in the Middle East. Stocks in Asia reversed gains and Treasury futures advanced. The risk-off move was given extra momentum when Iran's leader said severe retaliation awaits the commander's killers. The U.S. airstrike lifted London's Brent crude to as much as $69 a barrel, the highest since the attacks on Saudi Arabian oil infrastructure in September. Gold prices rose and the yen strengthened. In Beijing, I'm Selena Wang, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Selena, thank you. We're seeing heavy volumes in oil trading after the attack, with crude prices higher by more than 3%. Stephen Shork is an oil analyst and president of the Shork Group.
When Iran attacked Saudi Aramco back in September, there was no response from either Saudi Arabia or from the United States to that attack. And so prices quickly retreated. The difference now is within 2 days, we had the siege on the U.S. Embassy, and we've had a very strong response. So if this time is different, and I do believe there's a good chance this time is different, this could be the start of something significant, and that is, I think, going to be priced into the market over the next several days.
And checking prices now, West Texas Intermediate up 3.6%, up $2.23 at $63.41 a barrel. Brent is up 3.8% at $68.75.
As tensions flare, we're seeing a lot of big U.S. stocks losing ground in early trading. Apple, Twitter, Tesla, and Microsoft are all lower by more than 1%. Uber, Micron, AMD, and Bank of America are down more than 2%. Energy companies are gaining. ExxonMobil, Chesapeake Energy, Occidental Petroleum, and several other oil companies are higher in early trading.
And we'll have more on the ramped-up tensions throughout the morning here on Bloomberg Radio. In other news we're following, the Federal Reserve is also in focus. We'll bring you conversations with regional Fed presidents Charles Evans and Loretta Mester, plus minutes from the central bank's December meeting. Bloomberg's Michael McKee has those interviews today and is here with a preview from San Diego.
The big questions for policymakers as 2020 dawns are how policymaking will change after their framework review and what tools they would use the next time the U.S. slips into recession. We'll get some early answers as a host of Fed officials speak at the American Economic Association annual meeting. If, for example, Fed officials want to change or drop their 2% inflation target, they'll need to start preparing market participants. Back in Washington, meanwhile, the holiday-delayed Fed minutes may offer a hint on plans for the repo market, plus what it would take to shift the view among officials that interest rates are on hold all year. In San Diego, California, Michael McKee, Bloomberg Daybreak.
And Michael, thank you. Coming up today, Michael speaks with Chicago Fed President Charles Evans at 11 a.m. Wall Street time. At 1 p.m., he sits down for a conversation with Cleveland Fed Chief Loretta Mester. Tune in for both interviews live on Bloomberg Radio and television.
We have more details on Carlos Ghosn's escape from Japan. The operator of the private jet that transported Ghosn to Beirut says the aircraft was deployed illegally and used falsified records that didn't mention the former Nissan executive as a passenger. The jet company is filing a criminal complaint over what it calls, quote, the illegal use of its jet charter services. S&P futures are lower by 1%, down almost 34 points. Dow futures down 264 points. NASDAQ futures lower by almost 110 points. Straight ahead, the latest world and national news. This is Bloomberg. At 5:07 on Wall Street, Michael Barr has more on what's going on around the world. Busy morning, Michael.
Yes, it is, Nathan. Former Vice President Joe Biden warns that President Donald Trump, and this is a quote, just tossed a stick of dynamite into a tinderbox by ordering the killing of a powerful Iranian general in Baghdad. Biden, in a statement, says no American will mourn Qasem Soleimani's passing. He deserved to be brought to justice for his crimes against American troops and thousands of innocents throughout the region. But Biden added that Trump owes the American people an explanation of the strategy and plan to keep safe our troops and embassy personnel, our people, and our interests both here at home and abroad, and our partners throughout the region and beyond. Democratic Senator Cory Booker says Americans must be prepared for those ramifications as a direct result of the president's actions.
We have a president that's made that area more unstable, more dangerous, who has really overseen with his foreign policy by tweet and by impulse, often against his very generals in the Middle East.
Meanwhile, Republican Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina praised Trump's move and said the price of killing and injuring Americans has just gone up drastically. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell are locked in a stare down over the terms of President Trump's impeachment trial. Bloomberg's Bob Moon reports McConnell is set to deliver remarks on the Senate floor today.
With Pelosi still holding up delivering 2 articles of impeachment to the Senate,
we can't take up a matter we don't have.
McConnell shows no signs of shifting his position that a vote on calling witnesses can be left until after the impeachment case is argued, leading Democratic Senator Chuck Schumer to ask why Republicans don't want evidence blocked by Trump to be heard.
He hasn't given a single reason why there shouldn't be documents and witnesses.
That pressure isn't just coming from Democrats.
I am open to witnesses.
Maine's Susan Collins is among a few Republican senators openly pressuring McConnell not to do the White House's bidding. Democrats would need at least 4 Republican votes to call witnesses. Bob Moon, Bloomberg Daybreak.
President Trump's first campaign event of 2020 is aimed at keeping evangelicals on his side. Trump will visit a Miami megachurch today. The effort comes after the magazine Christianity Today published an editorial on December 19th calling for Trump's removal from office by either impeachment or defeat at the polls. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Nathan.
All right, Michael, thanks. It's 5:09 now on Wall Street. Time for the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update. Here's John Stashauer.
Nathan, 4 local teams played their first game of 2020, 2 against each other, and that one the Devils topped the Islanders 2-1 at the Coliseum. New Jersey's won a season-high 3 in a row. Rangers were in Calgary, lost to the Flames 4-3, all the scoring in the first 28 minutes of the game. The Nets were in Dallas, blew a 10-point second-half lead and fell to the Mavs 123-111. Dallas's young star Luka Doncic with 31 points. The Nets have lost 4 in a row. They are in Toronto tomorrow. They will be getting Karis LeVert back. He's been out 7 weeks with a broken thumb, but still no sign of Kyrie Irving. He hasn't played since mid-November. Baseball suspended Yankee pitcher Domingo Germán for 81 games, reduced to 63 based on time served last season. Germán was involved in a domestic violence incident ending his 2019 campaign. He had won a team-high 18 games for the Yanks. His suspension is the longest in a domestic violence case where there were no criminal charges. The Mets introduced their new reliever, Dellin Betances, who's like the New York City Marathon. He has touched all 5 boroughs.
New York is in my blood, you know. I grew up playing in the Lower East Side. I went to high school in Brooklyn. In 2007, I played minor league ball in Staten Island. In 2011, I made my major league debut in the Bronx, and now I stand here, getting the chance to wear this Mets uniform and playing in Queens.
Chances his final season with the Yanks, he missed almost all year with 2 different injuries. Took a while, but the Cowboys have reportedly moved on from Jason Garrett, their coach the last 10 years, so there'll be 5 NFL coaching changes, 3 in the NFC East, with the Giants looking. They're talking today to former Green Bay coach Mike McCarthy. With the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update, I'm John Stashower. Nathan?
All right, John, thanks. Tune in tonight for the Bloomberg Business of Sports show. We look back at the life and legacy of the late former NBA Commissioner David Stern. You can catch that tonight at 8, tomorrow at 11 in the morning on Bloomberg Radio, or subscribe to Bloomberg Business of Sports wherever you get your podcasts. S&P futures lower now by almost 36 points. Dow futures down 272. NASDAQ futures lower by 117 points. This is Bloomberg.
Hey, y'all. Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
Why has J.D. Power ranked Commonwealth Financial Network #1 in independent advisor satisfaction among financial investment firms for the 6th straight time? We think it comes down to one thing: you. Because it's your input and feedback that keeps us focused on what's most important to you and your clients, and continually pushes us to be the best we can be. Maybe that's why we receive top marks in every category of the J.D. Power 2019 Advisor Satisfaction Survey. They named us #1 in client support, #1 in firm leadership, #1 in operational support, #1 in compensation, #1 in professional development support, and #1 in technology support. Ready to partner with the best? Call Commonwealth at 866-462-3638 or visit commonwealth.com and feel the power. Member FINRA SIPC, a registered investment advisor. For 2019 J.D. Power award information, visit jdpower.com/awards.
25 years ago, NJIT graduate Dick Sweeney.
Why book with Sunhat Villas? Take over 200 sea view spots, over 350 places at the heart of the destination, over 400 villas just a short walk to the beach, and even more countryside retreats. Add in 1 to 10 bedroom options, 19 years of experience, and 5-star reviews. And you'll find countless reasons to make Sunhat your #1. Search Sunhat Villas, apt to protected.
I used to be a bit of a rubbish sleeper. I'd toss and turn all night, and somehow I could never find the comfy bit of the mattress. It was a proper nightmare. That's what brought me here, testing mattresses in the Which Test Lab. We use a custom-made barrel rolling machine to simulate a decade's worth of use. And the mattresses that perform best are the only ones we recommend for your bedroom.
Which tests harder so you can buy smarter. Visit which.co.uk.
This year, it's time to live well your way. Time to hit Boots. To reboot your get up and go. Reboot your fresh start. Reboot your vegan choices. And reboot your... Make 2020 your time for a reboot. Save up to half price on wellbeing products in-store on Boots.com or via the app. Boots. Let's feel good. Subject to availability. Exclusions apply. See in-store or online for details. Offer ends 28th of January.
You don't just live in one room, so why should your Wi-Fi? With Sky Broadband's Wi-Fi guarantee, you'll get Wi-Fi in every room or money back. Perfect for food shopping in the bedroom, gaming in your PJs in the lounge, or streaming sci-fi movies in the kitchen. Get Sky's super-fast broadband and Wi-Fi guarantee. £32 a month for 18 months with $19.95 setup. Click on the banner now.
Sky Fibre errors, Sky Kit required. Refund on Boost component of subscription paid during current minimum term up to date of claim. Minimum 3 megabits per second or money back. Prices may change during minimum term. See sky.com/guarantee.
Here's Sherry Ann.
Joining us now is Mainstay Capital Management founder, CEO, and chief investment strategist David Kudla. We are seeing a bit more calm in the repo markets. The Fed, of course, injecting more than $240 billion or so into the system. But what happens once that starts to run off? This is supposed to be temporary liquidity, no?
Well, it's supposed to be temporary liquidity, but if you look at what Kathleen, look at everything she covered there, and she covered a lot of ground. And it's important not only in terms of what's happening to rates or what the Fed is doing, but it's important for those of us investing, or me as an investment strategist, because the Fed has had such an impact on the financial markets. It's not just about what happens with interest rate policy. They could be on hold for the remainder of this year. They could be on hold until the election, which is probable. I think they try to get interest rate cuts out of the way in 2019 so that they can be on hold and not seen biased either way relative to the upcoming presidential elections coming later this year. But we have liquidity that is coming into the system. And whether, we've referred to it as not QE, but it's a quantity of money coming into the financial system that has buoyed stocks.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app. Or check your local cable listings. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. The risk-on sentiment that ushered in the new year taking a hit as tension between the U.S. and Iran escalates, sinking stocks and U.S. stock index futures. The yen is surging and Japan markets remain closed for a holiday. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures are down 35 points this morning. Dow futures down 273 and NASDAQ futures down 115. The DAX in Germany is down 1.5%. 10-year Treasury up 17/30 seconds, yield 1.81%. Yield on the 2-year, 1.53%. NYMEX crude oil is up 3.9%, up $2.37 at $63.55 a barrel. COMEX gold up 1.4%, or $21.50 at $15.49.60 an ounce. The euro, 1.1136 against the dollar. British pound, 1.3083, and the yen at 108.10. And today we are watching for reports on construction spending and manufacturing at 10 o'clock Wall Street time. Then at 2, it's the minutes from the Federal Reserve's December meeting. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. The Pentagon says the U.S. military has killed General Qasem Soleimani, the head of Iran's elite Quds force, at the direction of President Trump. An airstrike killed Soleimani, architect of Iran's regional security apparatus, at Baghdad's international airport today. The attack is expected to draw severe Iranian retaliation against Israel and American interests. The Defense Department says Soleimani was actively developing plans to attack American diplomats and service members in Iraq and throughout the region. President of the National Iranian American Council, Jamal Abdi.
Soleimani was somebody who, engaged in acts of terrorism.
The strike also killed the deputy commander of Iran-backed militias in Iraq, known as the Popular Mobilization Forces. Daniel Davis is a senior fellow and military expert at Defense Priorities.
The timing really couldn't have been any worse, because we had just got things calmed down from the protests against the embassy, and this is almost certainly going to flame those back up. Now, look, nobody's going to shed any tears in the United States over Soleimani, because he had a lot of American blood on his hand. But this places a target on the back of all American military forces and diplomatic forces over there. Now then, we run the risk of potentially getting caught up in the cycle of retaliation and escalation, which could potentially result in war, and that is in nobody's interest.
Former Vice President Joe Biden warns that President Trump just tossed a stick of dynamite into a tinderbox by ordering the killing of the powerful Iranian general in Baghdad. In a statement, Biden says Qasem Soleimani deserved to be brought to justice for his crimes against American troops and thousands of innocents throughout the region, but he added that Trump owes the American people an explanation. In sports, in the NBA, the Nets lost along with the Warriors. In the NHL, the Devils beat the Islanders 2-1. The Rangers lost along with the Bruins. In the NFL, ESPN is reporting that the Cowboys have released Jason Garrett as head coach. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Nathan.
All right, Michael, thank you. We're coming up to 5:21 on Wall Street, live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studios. This is Bloomberg Daybreak. Jeffrey Yu joins us now, Chief Investment Officer at UBS. We just heard some of the risk of this tension between the U.S. and Iran spiraling out of control following the killing of Soleimani. Does the market need to start pricing in geopolitical risk premium now?
So I think the market's actually reacted already. If you look at where crude has gone, if you look at gold, and when we look at geopolitical risk, as always, we have to identify the source. And when it does come from the Middle East and the transmission into higher oil prices, what that does for inflation, real rates, for example, I think you are seeing a response across the curve now. Does the market need to do more at this stage? I just think we need to see how the situation develops. But clearly insurance is being put back on.
Yeah, we haven't seen a reaction like this since the strike on the Ob Cake facility back in September. How could this be different? Do you see this as different?
Well, I guess it's too early to tell, and I'll probably defer to the geopolitical specialists on that. But again, from the market's point of view, they if they want to use the incident earlier in the year, as a template, it should be noted that things, especially when we look at crude prices, they came down to the pre-strike levels pretty quickly, and actually went below that towards early October. But that was back then when global growth expectations were not yet stabilizing. So I guess the view is, does this escalate in a way which causes markets to readjust their growth forecasts for the coming year? And bear in mind, it's not like we were expecting things to be firing all cylinders for 2020, right? So I think this just adds some scope for markets to just be a little more to be a little more vigilant, need for diversification, and again, we're apt to put some insurance policies on.
So how much more volatility could we read into the market here? What levels of volatility could we be looking for?
Well, context really matters, right? And especially, we are coming off a very, very low vol environment. So if you look at some of the biggest movers, today, for example, in spot markets, in foreign exchange, dollar yen, that's come off. But if you look at volatility, right, it's just looking at the Bloomberg terminals, 1 month implied vols in dollar yen. It's gone from below 5 as of close, yesterday to 5.6. So that is, quite a move from a low base, however, but we're still, half of where we were, let's say, in August and September. So if you want to look for an upside view in volatility, then clearly there's a long way to go. But that's because, thanks to central bank action, we start from a very, very low base. And we need to bear in mind, if, let's just say, there's more short-term risk, central banks clearly, will keep the taps back on.
In our last 30 seconds or so here, could we be looking for further flattening of the U.S. Treasury yield curve in light of this?
So, I think short answer, right now is yes, that's going to be where the pressure is if markets, want to put more insurance on, not just for, the short-term risks, but, noting how global growth is probably, not going to be that robust next year. That is going to be the direction of the curve. But again, let's see, where things develop, and if necessary, let's see whether there's going to be a reaction from central banks. I think for now, it's been very quick, so people will be waiting to put any judgment on it.
Much appreciated getting your quick reaction to what's happening this morning. Thanks to Jeffrey Yu, Chief Investment Officer at UBS. And taking a look at the market this morning, it is certainly risk off across the board, with S&P futures down now 34 points, Dow futures lower by 263 points, NASDAQ futures down 109 points. 10-year up 16.30 seconds, yield 1.82%, the 2-year at 1.53. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Market Minute. Wall Street started the new year with record highs, but the mood is vastly different this morning. U.S. stocks are headed for a lower open, with futures down 1% as tension between the U.S. and Iran escalates, and oil is surging after a U.S. airstrike killed a top Iranian general in Iraq. A New York woman is suing pet food maker Blue Buffalo, claiming its Blue Wilderness packaging deceptively markets the dog food as being inspired by the diet of wolves. Dog owner's suit alleges that the pet food contains undisclosed carbohydrates that were not a meaningful part of wolves' diets, leading to obesity in dogs. Home sales in Manhattan continue to fall, but the 1.2% drop in last year's fourth quarter was actually good news. A report from Miller Samuel and Douglas Elliman says that decline marked the smallest year-over-year sales dip in 2 years. And we'll continue to watch Apple shares a day after they rose above $300, adding almost $30 billion of value, bringing Apple's total market value to $1.3 trillion. Gina Cervetti, Bloomberg Radio.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their businesses strategically, yet the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating system, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset management. I'm Steve Meyer, President and Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform of data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
Business is constantly evolving.
It's great being with Eon. Right now, they're offering their customers the chance to win big thanks to an exclusive prize draw, with the top prize being a £5,000 holiday. Where to? Well, you choose the destination and they do the rest. Another winter warmer from Eon. To check out all the great prizes on offer, for the full terms and conditions, and to enter, go to eonenergy.com/win by the 30th of January.
Dad, I'm doing the mashed potatoes too.
Do the Albert Bartlett potato mash.
Do the twist.
Do the patatas bravas with a British twist.
Yeah. Do the brown sauce, balsamic and chutney.
Oh, do the melting potato slices.
Do the dishes.
Grab a brand new recyclable bag today and do the Albert Bartlett.
He's got a brand new bag.
Hey, it's me again, the TV. Since my family gave me Now TV, there's no more endlessly searching for something they want to watch, because now I don't do filler TV, just killer TV. If my family want movies, I've got blockbusters. Football, how about the Premier League? Or crime dramas, I've got loads. And they're never going to guess who did it. Now they can watch whatever they're in the mood for.
What's your TV got for you tonight? Now TV. 18 plus, month passes auto renew, terms apply.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip Bayless.
Follow at TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
Cutting for the net, scores! On the goal line, Marshawn scores!
Hockey fans, the 2019-20 NHL season is here.
And tucks it home!
And with this team, it's really fun to be a part of a team like that.
You can hear the action live on TuneIn Premium, from regular season action to the All-Star Game and through the Stanley Cup in June. Hear the home and away call for every game, for every team live. At home or on the go, never miss a game with the NHL on TuneIn Premium.
Upgrade today. Active Broker Studio in New York, Bloomberg 1130. To Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1. To Boston, Bloomberg 106.1. To San Francisco, Bloomberg 960. To the country, Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
And it's 5:30 on Wall Street. Good morning. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. We are just about 4 hours away from the opening of U.S. trading. Let's get you up to date on the news you need to know at this hour. U.S. stock index futures and bond yields are falling after a U.S. airstrike killing one of Iran's most powerful generals. Qasem Soleimani, who led militias across the Middle East, died in a strike in Iraq. We get more from Bloomberg International editor Jody Schneider.
This was one of Iran's most powerful generals. The Pentagon is saying that this came at the direction of President Trump and that it's a decisive action that was taken as a defensive action to protect U.S. personnel by killing this general. They said he was actively developing plans to attack U.S. diplomats and service members in Iraq and throughout the region.
Now, the airstrike was ordered by President Trump. It sent global stocks tumbling on fears of an armed confrontation. Barbara Slavin is senior fellow at the Atlantic Council and director of the Future of Iran Initiative.
I'm not sure Donald Trump understands the implications of what he has unleashed. He thinks he's a big hero, but a lot more people are probably going to die because of this.
Oil futures surged more than 4% following the attack. Stephen Shork is an oil analyst and president of the Short Group.
The market is not positioned for this event. So if we begin to broach that $65, $66 range, you're going to have a lot of option riders that are going to go into a panic, which could really propel a short-term spike in price.
Checking prices now, NYMEX crude oil is up 4.2% or $2.55 at $63.73 a barrel. Brent is up 4.3% at $69.10.
And we'll have more on the ramped up tensions throughout the morning here on Bloomberg Radio. But first, it's a busy day on the economic front. We get a reading on manufacturing from ISM at 10 a.m. Wall Street time. The Fed releases minutes from its December meeting at 2. Bloomberg's Vinny Del Giudice reports.
Bloomberg Economics advises investors to keep their eyes peeled for comments indicating what it would take for Fed officials to alter their wait-and-see stance. The officials, Bloomberg Economics notes, are keen to stay on the sidelines during an election year. 13 of 17 officials forecast no change in rates in 2020. Vinny Del Giudice, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, thanks, Vinny. And we'll also hear directly from two Fed officials today. Tune in for comments from Chicago Fed President Charles Evans and Cleveland Fed Chief Loretta Mester. They sit down for interviews today with Bloomberg's Michael McKee at 11 a.m. and 1 p.m. Wall Street time. Now let's get you up to date on how stocks are faring. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures are down about 36 points. Dow futures down 275 and NASDAQ futures down 115. The DAX in Germany is down 1.6%, and a 10-year Treasury up 17/30 seconds, yield 1.81%. Straight ahead, the latest world and national news, and this is Bloomberg.
All right, Karen, thank you. At 5:33 on Wall Street, we get a check on what's happening around the world with Bloomberg's Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Nathan. Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden says President Donald Trump has, quote, now tossed a stick of dynamite into a tinderbox with the targeted killing of Iran's top general in an airstrike at Baghdad's international airport. Biden, in a statement, says while no American will mourn General Qasem Soleimani's passing, President Trump owes the American people an explanation of the strategy and our plan to keep safe our troops and embassy personnel, our people, and our interests. The former vice president is joining other Democratic White House hopefuls in criticizing Trump's order, saying it could leave the U.S. on the brink of a major conflict across the Middle East. Presidential candidate Senator Cory Booker.
We see a president that has made folks less safe and has escalated problems in diplomacy.
Meanwhile, Republican Senator Marco Rubio of Florida said Iran was entirely to blame for bringing about the dangerous moment now before us. GOP Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina praised Trump's move and said the price of killing and injuring Americans has just gone up drastically. Julian Castro's exit from the 2020 Democratic presidential primary race is putting new attention on the frustrating reality for the party that the top tier of candidates remains all white. His departure from the race on Thursday comes a month after California Senator Kamala Harris's decision to end her 2020 bid. Castro pushed his rivals to embrace decriminalizing border crossings and was the first to call for President Donald Trump's impeachment, but he also languished in the polls and with fundraising. The founding director of UCLA's Latino Policy and Politics Initiative says marginalized voters could end up paying the price with the withdrawal of candidates of color. Australians are angry as they face a wildfire crisis, and they let Prime Minister Scott Morrison know it during his visit.
How come we only had 4 trucks to defend our town? Because our town doesn't have a lot of money, but we have hearts of gold, Mr. Prime Minister.
Prime Minister Morrison.
My
understand the very strong feelings people have. They've lost everything, and there is still, some very dangerous days ahead.
Hundreds of homes have been lost. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Nathan.
All right, Michael, thanks. 5:35 on Wall Street. Time for the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update. Here's John Stashower.
Nathan, the Nets knew they weren't going to have Kevin Durant this season. They thought they'd have Kyrie Irving. They haven't since mid-November, and with last night's 123-111 loss in Dallas, Brooklyn has dropped under 500 with a fourth loss in a row. Luka Doncic led the Mavs with 31 points. Knicks go for a fourth win in a row tonight. In Phoenix, Rangers were in Calgary, fell behind early, scored 2 goals in 25 seconds to tie the game at 2. They tied it at 3, but the Flames won 4-3. Devils topped the Islanders 2-1. College hoops, heartbreak for Columbia. Lost at Maine on a 3-pointer at the buzzer of overtime. Fordham dropped its A-10 opener at VCU. Hofstra blown out at home, lost by 27 to William & Mary. Northeast Conference wins for Wagner and St. Francis. The Dallas Cowboys have reportedly cut ties with longtime coach Jason Garrett. The Giants will today interview Mike McCarthy, who once won a Super Bowl with Green Bay. Some have wondered why the Giants fired Coach Pat Shurmur and not General Manager Dave Gettleman.
Just to be clear, there were substantive discussions between myself and ownership regarding my job performance and vision moving forward over the past few weeks. So John and Steve made their decisions, and here I stand. And before we go any further, I just want to be clear, Pat Shurmur is as fine a man as I've ever worked with.
NFL playoffs kick off tomorrow with the AFC wildcard games. Buffalo at Houston, Tennessee at New England. The Patriots have not lost an AFC playoff game since 2015. They haven't lost one at home since 2012. Domingo Germán, who won 18 games for the Yankees and then stopped pitching after a domestic violence incident, has been suspended for the first 63 games of 2020. For the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update, I'm John Stashower. Nathan?
Thank you, John. It's 5:37 on Wall Street, and the latest edition of Bloomberg Business Week is on newsstands now with the cover on SoftBank and why its problems are much bigger than WeWork. Also in this week's issue, the company that's looking to make big law more robotic. Jeff Muskas contributed to the story for Bloomberg Business Week.
The sales pitch is basically, okay, well, we've had Wilson Sonsini lawyers set up this series of prompts that can get you to a point where with as little as 10% of the costs of a typical compliance exercise, you can sort of get yourself compliant and continue to update as needed.
And you can read more about this and other stories in this week's edition of Bloomberg Business Week on newsstands now and online at businessweek.com. Terminal customers can receive a complimentary subscription at MAG Go and listen to Business Week with Carol Masser and Jason Kelly weekdays at 2 p.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg Radio. It's 5:38 on Wall Street. Time now for the Tri-State Business Report. Here's Bloomberg's Ed Corey. Good morning, Ed.
Morning, Nathan. More than 70,000 tipped workers will no longer receive below minimum wages by the end of 2020. That's under an order announced by New York's governor Tuesday. The order applies to a vast array of workers, including hairdressers, nail salon workers, valet parking attendants, and tow truck drivers, but excludes restaurant workers. Revenue at Connecticut's 2 casinos fell last year. A report in The Day says Mohegan Sun's net revenues were $992 million, down about 7% from the nearly $1.1 billion it took in the previous year. 7 months after its grand opening, New York City's first outlet mall is still less than half full. In fact, a report in the city says Staten Island's taxpayer-aided Empire Outlets announced a food and beverage area would open in the fall. It remains unbuilt, along with the rest of the 4th floor of the development. That's your Bloomberg Tri-State Business Report. I'm Ed Corey. Nathan?
All right, Ed, thank you. It's 5:39 on Wall Street. Bloomberg Radio is on the air from San Francisco to New York, London to Hong Kong. Let's check in with our global news team for some of the top stories heard on our 300 affiliate radio stations around the world.
I'm Jeff Bellinger, and on Kogo in San Diego, I'm reporting a former HBO executive is going to work for Apple.
I'm Courtney Donahoe on KTRH in Houston. 5 new oil pipelines are set to open in the Permian Basin through 2021.
I'm Roger Hearing on Bloomberg DAB Digital Radio in London. We're reporting on the pound's continued decline.
I'm Gina Cervetti, and on WBBM in Chicago, I'm reporting that crop trading giant Bunge is exiting U.S. ethanol production.
And those are some of the stories our 2,700 Bloomberg journalists and analysts are working on this morning around the world. Now, some other stories we're watching. We're getting more details on Carlos Ghosn's escape from Japan. The operator of the private jet that transported Ghosn to Beirut says the aircraft was deployed illegally and used falsified records that didn't mention the former Nissan executive as a passenger. The jet company is filing a criminal complaint over what it calls, quote, the illegal use of its jet charter services. And China is denying reports that a tie-up between the Shanghai and London stock exchanges has been halted. China says the operation of a stock link between the exchanges has been normal since June. Sources previously told Bloomberg the Chinese government had suspended the tie-up on political grounds. S&P futures lower now by 39 points. Dow futures down 312. NASDAQ futures lower by 129 points. This is Bloomberg.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing for a highly personalized experience? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's fast-paced environment, where the only constants are change and volatility, you need a prime broker who's both steady and agile, focused on supporting your needs so that you can focus on growing your business and producing results. Exceptional client service and advocating for our clients is at the core of what we do. Our award-winning high-touch team is just one of the benefits of working with BNY Mellon. We help alternative investment managers create great experiences for their clients. Whether it's customized financing, securities lending solutions, platform access, or outsourced trading, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and dedicated to meeting your evolving demands.
To learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers, visit Pershing.com. Pershing, LLC. Member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
Message and data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at babbel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
This is your Bloomberg Real Estate.
The Norwegian sale is now on. Fly to Europe from £29.90, North America from £134.90, or South America from £189.90. And with low fares to over 150 other destinations, the world has never been closer. Start your journey at Norwegian.com. All fares are one way from London Gatwick. Baggage fees apply. Travel periods vary by route. Visit our website for more details. Sale ends 13th of January.
Having to deal with financial stuff can make you feel... ah! But at Money Supermarket, we make you feel... ah. That's because we go further to help you get money car. We don't just compare. We cut prices to help you get better car insurance deals. Get money car. Money Supermarket.
This year, it's time to live well your way. Time to hit Boots. To reboot your get up and go. Reboot your fresh start. Reboot your vegan choices. And reboot your... Make 2020 your time for a reboot. Save up to half price on wellbeing products in-store on Boots.com or via the app. Boots. Let's feel good. Subject to availability. Exclusions apply. See in-store or online for details. Offer ends 28th of January.
Pascal gobbles up the rebound and slams it down. Catch your favorite NBA team right here on TuneIn.
A step back deep three is up and in.
Search NBA on TuneIn and hear all the action. The NBA lives on TuneIn.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards, at the goal line, it's intercepted!
Listen live as the action unfolds or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught. It is in for the right side for the touchdown.
Search NFL today.
4 hours a day, on air and at TikTok on Twitter. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. This is Bloomberg Radio. Now, a global news update.
Special report, U.S. airstrike. I'm John Trout. The United States has killed Iran's top general in an airstrike at Baghdad's international airport.
The killing of Qasem Soleimani is likely to bring back some of the old hatreds and possibly plunge Iraq into civil strife. Air attacks against pro-Iranian militia camps in Iraq on Sunday prompted new calls by some Iraqi politicians for the U.S. to get its military out of that country. Iraqi leaders protested, fearing getting caught in the middle of a U.S.-Iran conflict.
The Pentagon says Soleimani was killed at the direction of President Trump. Reaction from Senator Cory Booker.
Soleimani is a person with American blood on his hands. He's plotted, planned, and executed attacks on American citizens, American soldiers. He's been doing much to destabilize that region and destabilize Iraq.
The Department of Defense says Soleimani was developing plans to attack American diplomats in that region. I'm John Trout.
Why all the top-tier experts? Because business is not a magic trick.
Give us a sense of the economic backdrop.
Bloomberg Markets.
Which financial records are these?
Weekday mornings at 10 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. Bloomberg, the world is listening. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. The risk-on sentiment that ushered in the new year taking a hit as tension between the U.S. and Iran escalates, sinking stocks and U.S. stock index futures. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures are down 40 points this morning. Dow futures down 315. NASDAQ futures down 129. The DAX in Germany is down 1.7%. 10-year Treasury up 18.30 seconds, yield 1.81%. The yield on the 2-year 1.53%. NYMEX crude oil up 4 1/3%, up $2.66 at $63.85 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 1.5% or $22.60 at $15.50.70 an ounce. The euro 1.1133 against the dollar. British pound 1.3075, and the yen is at 108.07. And today we are watching for reports on construction spending and manufacturing out at 10 o'clock Wall Street time. Then at 2 it's the minutes from the Fed's December meeting. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael.
Karen, Iran has vowed harsh retaliation for a U.S. airstrike near Baghdad's airport that killed its top general and the architect of its interventions across the Middle East. The killing of General Qasem Soleimani, the head of Iran's elite Quds force, marks a major escalation in the standoff between Washington and Iran. Iran's supreme leader called Soleimani the international face of resistance. Former U.S. Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for the Middle East, Mick Mulroy, explains why this is a big event for the U.S.-Iran relations.
This was a significant person, as Soleimani is considered a national hero and respected by most Iranians. He's the second most popular person in Iran after the Ayatollah.
The U.S. ordered its citizens to leave Iraq and close the embassy in Baghdad. A strong response from Iran is likely, according to Daniel Davis, a senior fellow and military expert at Defense Priorities.
I can't imagine someone as high profile as Soleimani, they're not doing something in retaliation, but obviously they do have to be careful. They can't go too far, because if they themselves spark, a strong military reaction from the United States, it could literally bring down their regime. So they probably will have a measured response.
In sports in the NBA, the Nets lost along with the Warriors. In the NHL, the Devils beat the Islanders 2-1. The Rangers lost along with the Bruins. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Nathan.
Michael, thank you. It is 5:49 on Wall Street, live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studios. This is Bloomberg Daybreak. We're joined live now by Bloomberg News International Government Executive Editor Rosalind Matheson for more on the U.S. airstrike in Iraq that killed General Soleimani. Good morning, Rosalind. I hope you can give us some more context on the stature that the general held in Iran and the broader region. I've seen some commentary saying that his loss could be bigger than bin Laden, even bigger than the leader of Islamic State. Is that fair?
Well, he certainly was a very significant player. He basically led all the proxy militias that have extended Iran's influence through the region. Some have said, in fact, he was in many ways the architect of Iran's foreign policy in the region. He rose to prominence during the Iran-Iraq war. He came from a very impoverished background to rise all the way to the top. It's very clear that he had the ear of the leadership in Tehran when the leader of Syria came to Tehran only recently. The Iranian foreign minister was not invited into that meeting, but this general was. He directed a lot of Iran's operations through the region against Islamic State. The question is, of course, with his death, what fills the vacuum? His deputy is likely to step in, but this character was larger than life in the region, and that may have a knock-on effect on Iran's operations in many countries.
And now there's a lot of fear building that Iran could respond with severe retaliation. That is something Iran itself has promised now. What could happen?
Well, Iran, as I said, has been very, very skilled at using proxies in the region and beyond. We've seen that in Yemen, we've seen that in Saudi, we've seen that in Iraq, and of course they are known to have proxy operations that they could fire up if necessary in the US itself. And the real fear, of course, is that they take a strategic decision to target US assets, be they in the Middle East or on US soil. At the moment, though, Iran is threatening retaliation, but likely to take a fairly measured initial response. That's because they are very good at calculating where the lines are. And even though this is a major hit to them and certainly an increase in tensions, they will be very careful not to go over the line into what could be an all-out war with the US, which is something that they would lose. So we could see perhaps some days of threats and then perhaps a measured response some days from now. But they're going to be very careful not to go over that line with the US, no matter what.
What about the line regarding other powers in the region, like Israel, like Saudi Arabia?
Well, that's right. Those are the key questions, because this will have ripple effects all through the region, not just in Iraq, but also in places like Lebanon, where Iran has been a significant player. We have seen Iran take action against the Saudis, as we've seen with that attack on the refinery some months ago. And we saw in that response that the Saudis were very careful in how they blamed Iran and in terms of how they retaliated. And again, that's around calculating where the lines are. But we could see this ripple through to a number of countries. We see that in Israel, of course, Netanyahu is looking to return early from a trip to Greece. We understand he's coming back early to Israel, which would be a country that could be at risk of some retaliation. So you can expect that the Saudis and Israel will be very much beefing up their defenses and on watch for any action on their own soil.
All right, that's Bloomberg International Government Executive Editor Rosalind Matheson. Again, Rosalind, thank you so much for giving us the very latest on what's happening in the Middle East following the U.S. airstrike that killed Iran's Quds Force General Qasem Soleimani. Karen.
All right, Nathan, thank you. It is 5:53 on Wall Street. It's time for the Bloomberg Law Report. Let's get to the legal stories we're watching this morning from Bloomberg's Jeff Bellinger.
The Federal Trade Commission is looking to update the rules in the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act. It is part of an expected push by American and European regulators to ramp up enforcement of privacy laws in 2020. The Lee County, Florida School Board defeated negligence and wrongful death claims related to the death of a high school football player who died during practice. And it appears Missouri is about to join the list of states that collect sales tax on remote sales. A 2018 Supreme Court ruling cleared the way for such levies.
Bloomberg Law. Everything you need, all on one legal research platform, including guidance, analysis, and Bloomberg Market Intelligence. Find out more at BloombergLaw.com.
And now another legal story we're watching. Uber and Postmates suing the state of California over a labor law designed to ensure that gig workers receive employment protections. It set in motion a dispute about the rights of Uber drivers and others who use apps to work as independent contractors. For more on the lawsuit, Bloomberg's June Grasso speaks with Cornell Law School professor Stuart Schwab.
The plaintiffs claim that the new law is arbitrary and violates the U.S. and California constitutions. How strong is their claim?
I must say that I'm pretty skeptical about that. There's no suspect classification here. This is not a race-based classification or a sex-based classification or anything like that. And, the fact that there's a lot of detail here, there's some arbitrariness on which side of the line you're on, is well recognized and can basically be argued with a lot of statutes. So I'm a bit skeptical of the constitutional argument.
So then is it more of a political argument as to what's going to happen with this statute to Uber's business model, to Uber and Lyft and Postmates?
Enacts what's called the ABC test, which is just a three-part test, and part B of it is you have to work outside the employer's usual line of business, and so it will be difficult for Uber drivers to say that they're not in Uber's business of driving or providing rides. Uber continues to say that even under the ABC test, its drivers are independent contractors. This part B of the test, that they have to be outside the usual line of business, is going to be a difficult argument to make. And so I think in significant part, this new statute was targeting Uber drivers, Lyft, those rideshare drivers. And I think it's going to be hard to make a statutory argument that they aren't covered.
Are other states considering similar legislation?
Well, Massachusetts actually about a decade ago enacted its version of the ABC test, and so it's been operating with that with some time. This is a hot political topic right now, and in one form or another, other states are doing it. And I might mention, of course, this first came out of a California Supreme Court decision last year, the Dynamex case, where they adopted the ABC test, and so other state courts, state Supreme Courts, are also wrestling with this issue. Should they have this new test of who is an employee?
And that's Cornell Law School professor Stuart Schwab speaking with Bloomberg's June Grasso. Catch more of that interview plus analysis of the latest legal news by subscribing to the Bloomberg Law Podcast or downloading the show at Bloomberg.com/podcast. And attorneys can find exceptional legal research and business development tools at BloombergLaw.com. Futures this morning are falling. S&P futures down about 50 points. Dow futures down 387 and NASDAQ futures down 152. The DAX in Germany's down 1.9%. 10-year Treasury up 18.30 seconds, yield 1.81%, and the yield on the 2-year 1.53%. NYMEX crude oil is up 4.1% or $2.50 at $63.68 a barrel, and COMEX gold is up 1.6% or $23.70 at $15.52 an ounce. And Bloomberg Daybreak continues. This is Bloomberg.
Influential conversation.
We've all had the odd great idea, like careering down that black run when you've never even worn a pair of skis before, or that legendary Christmas when you tried to cook a turkey in the microwave. Well, forget about face planting in the snow or wrestling with poultry. How about trying something new, like treating yourself to a brand new set from our greatest ever range? Because before the 31st of January, you'll get a whopping £1,000 off the perfect model for you. Now that's got to be a great idea. Just visit sayat.co.uk to download your voucher.
Register for downloadable voucher online. Orders until 31st of January 2020. Registered from 1st of January 2020. UK 18 plus excludes Me Electric and Taraco 0% offer. Retail sales of new cars at participating dealers only. Cannot be used with any other voucher. T's and C's apply.
You don't just live in one room, so why should you Wi-Fi? With Sky Broadband's Wi-Fi guarantee, you'll get Wi-Fi in every room or money back. Perfect for food shopping in the bedroom, gaming in your PJs in the lounge, or streaming sci-fi movies in the kitchen. Get Sky's super fast broadband and Wi-Fi guarantee. £32 a month for 18 months with $19.95 setup. Click on the banner now.
Sky Fibre errors. Sky kit required. Refund on boost component of subscription paid during current minimum term up to date of claim. Minimum 3 megabits per second or money back. Prices may change during minimum term. See sky.com/guarantee.
Hi, I'm back. I just set a personal best on my park run. Feels great.
That's lovely, Mike. I think you've earned the right to put all the bins out.
Hey?
With Vitality Life Insurance, you get properly rewarded when you're active. In fact, you could save over £730 every year in discounts and rewards from our partners. Join over 1 million customers. Just search Vitality Life. Vitality. Positively different. Annual savings available with certain plans and are dependent on members' usage of rewards available. Terms and conditions apply.
For Friday, January 3rd, 2020, coming up this hour.
Global stocks tumble after a U.S. airstrike kills Iran's top general.
This is a huge crisis. I'm not sure Donald Trump understands the implications of what he has unleashed.
Oil prices surge as tensions climb in the Middle East.
The market is not positioned for this event.
U.S. futures fall, gold climbs, and the yen strengthens.
The top Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden comments on the airstrike in Iraq. I'm Michael Barr. More ahead.
I'm John Stashower in sports. A fourth straight loss for the Nets. They fell in Dallas. The Rangers lost in Calgary at the Coliseum. The Devils topped the Islanders.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak. On Bloomberg 1130 New York. Bloomberg 99.1 Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 106.1 Boston. Bloomberg 960 San Francisco. Sirius XM 119. And around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
Good morning, I'm Karen Moscow.
And I'm Nathan Hager. Bloomberg Daybreak brought to you by IBKR, the professional's gateway to the world's markets. Their clients enjoy lowest cost access to stocks, options, futures, forex, and fixed income from a single integrated account. Learn more at IBKR.com.
U.S. stock futures and bond yields are tumbling after a U.S. airstrike killing one of Iran's most powerful generals. We'll have more on that in a moment, but first, 6:01 on Wall Street, and we check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures are down 48 points, Dow futures down 382, and NASDAQ futures down 147. The DAX in Germany's down 1.9%. CAC in Paris and FTSE 100 both down about 0.7%. 10-year Treasury up 17/30 seconds, yield 1.81%. Yield on the 2-year, 1.53%. NYMEX crude oil up 4.1%, up $2.50 at $63.68 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 1.5% or $22.60 at $15.50.70 an ounce. The euro, 1.1134 against the dollar, and the yen is at 108.07. Nathan.
Well, Karen, it is risk off across global markets after the U.S. airstrike in Iraq that killed one of Iran's most powerful generals. Let's get the very latest now from Bloomberg's Mark Mills.
Qasem Soleimani, the head of Iran's elite Quds force, was killed in an airstrike at Baghdad's International Airport, an attack the Pentagon says was ordered by President Trump. New Jersey Democratic Senator Cory Booker said Soleimani had American blood on his hands.
He's plotted, planned, and executed attacks on American citizens, American soldiers.
Soleimani was a huge figure in Iranian military and political affairs. The death of Soleimani heightened fears that rising tensions between the U.S. and Iran could lead to an armed confrontation. Mark Mills, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Mark, thank you. And those fears of an armed confrontation are well-founded, according to Barbara Slavin. She is Senior Fellow at the Atlantic Council and Director of the Future of Iran Initiative.
You know, this is the worst it's been in 40 years, in my view. The worst it's been since Iran held American hostages at our embassy. This is a huge crisis. I'm not sure Donald Trump understands the implications of what he has unleashed. We have to see what happens in Iraq. How does the Iraqi government survive this? You know, it wasn't just Qasem Soleimani who was assassinated, but also a very prominent Iraqi, head of one of these militias, and someone with a great deal of political power as well. We're going to see the ripples flowing out from this for a long time.
Iran's top leaders all condemn the attack, with Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei vowing to avenge Soleimani's death.
Well, global stocks fell immediately on word of the attack, beginning in Asia. Here with more is Bloomberg's Selena Wang in our Beijing bureau. Good morning, Selena.
Good morning, Nathan and Karen. The risk-on sentiment that ushered in the new year took a hit as tensions flared in the Middle East. Stocks in Asia reversed gains and Treasury futures advanced. The risk-off move was given extra momentum when Iran's leader said severe retaliation awaits the commander's killers. The U.S. airstrike lifted London's Brent crude to as much as $69 a barrel, the highest since the attacks on Saudi Arabian oil infrastructure in September. Gold prices rose and the yen strengthened. In Beijing, I'm Selena Wang, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Selena, thank you. We're seeing heavy volumes in oil trading after the attack, with crude prices higher by more than 3%. Stephen Shork is an oil analyst and president of the Shork Group.
When Iran attacked Saudi Aramco back in September, there was no response from either Saudi Arabia or from the United States to that attack. And so prices quickly retreated. The difference now is within 2 days, we had the siege on the U.S. Embassy, and we've had a very strong response. So if this time is different, and I do believe there's a good chance this time is different, this could be the start of something significant, and that is, I think, going to be priced into the market over the next several days.
And checking prices now, West Texas Intermediate up 4.1%, up $2.53 at $63.72 a barrel. And Brent is up 4.3%, or $2.85 at $69.10 a barrel.
Now, as those tensions flare, we're seeing a lot of big U.S. stocks lose ground in early trading. Apple, Twitter, Tesla, and Microsoft are all lower by more than 1%. Uber, Micron, AMD, and Bank of America are down more than 2%. Energy companies are gaining. ExxonMobil, Chesapeake Energy, Occidental Petroleum, and several other oil companies are higher in early trading.
And we'll have more on the ramped-up tensions throughout the morning here on Bloomberg Radio. And other news we're following, the Federal Reserve is also in focus. We'll bring you conversations with the regional Fed presidents Charles Evans and Loretta Mester, plus minutes from the central bank's December meeting. Bloomberg's Michael McKee has those interviews today and is here with a preview from San Diego.
The big questions for policymakers as 2020 dawns are how policymaking will change after their framework review and what tools they would use the next time the U.S. slips into recession. We'll get some early answers as a host of Fed officials speak at the American Economic Association annual meeting. If, for example, Fed officials want to change or drop their 2% inflation target, they'll need to start preparing market participants. Back in Washington, meanwhile, the holiday-delayed Fed minutes may offer a hint on plans for the repo market, plus what it would take to shift the view among officials that interest rates are on hold all year. In San Diego, California, Michael McKee, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Michael, thank you. And coming up today, Michael speaks with Chicago Fed President Charles Evans at 11 a.m. Wall Street time. At 1 p.m., he sits down for a conversation with Cleveland Fed Chief Loretta Mester. And tune in for both interviews live on Bloomberg Radio and television.
We have more details on Carlos Ghosn's escape from Japan. The operator of the private jet that transported Ghosn to Beirut says the aircraft was deployed illegally and used falsified records that didn't mention the former Nissan executive as a passenger. The jet company is filing a criminal complaint over what it calls, quote, the illegal use of its jet charter services. S&P futures lower now by 46 points. Dow futures down 374. Straight ahead, the latest world and national news. This is Bloomberg. And at 6:07 on Wall Street, Michael Barr has more on what's going on around the world. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Nathan. Former Vice President Joe Biden warns that President Donald Trump, quote, now just tossed a stick of dynamite into a tinderbox by ordering the killing of a powerful Iranian general in Baghdad. Biden, in a statement, says no American will mourn Qasem Soleimani's passing. He deserved to be brought to justice for his crimes against American troops and thousands of innocents throughout the region. But Biden added that Trump owes the American people an explanation of the strategy and plan to keep safe our troops and embassy personnel, our people, and our interests, both here and at home and abroad, and our partners throughout the region and beyond. Democratic Senator Chris Van Hollen is not sure the airstrike was the best solution.
I'm very concerned. Obviously, we need to do what's necessary to protect the lives of Americans, but unfortunately, the actions this administration has taken for weeks and months now have taken a very difficult situation and made it much worse.
Meanwhile, Republican Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina praised Trump's move and said the price of killing and injuring Americans has just gone up drastically. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell are locked in a stare-down over the terms of President Trump's impeachment trial. Bloomberg's Bob Moon reports McConnell is set to deliver remarks on the Senate floor today.
With Pelosi still holding up delivering 2 articles of impeachment to the Senate,
we can't take up a matter we don't have.
McConnell shows no signs of shifting his position that a vote on calling witnesses can be left until after the impeachment case is argued, leading Democratic Senator Chuck Schumer to ask why Republicans don't want evidence blocked by Trump to be heard.
He hasn't given a single reason why there shouldn't be documents and witnesses.
That pressure isn't just coming from Democrats.
I am open to witnesses.
Maine's Susan Collins is among a few Republican senators openly pressuring McConnell not to do the White House's bidding. Democrats would need at least 4 Republican votes to call witnesses. Bob Moon, Bloomberg Daybreak.
President Trump's first campaign event of 2020 is aimed at keeping evangelicals on his side. Trump will visit a Miami megachurch today. The effort comes after the magazine Christianity Today published an editorial on December 19th calling for Trump's removal from office by either impeachment or defeat at the polls. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Nathan.
All right, Michael, thanks. It is 6:09 on Wall Street. Time for the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update. Here's John Stashauer.
Nathan, 4 local teams played their first game of 2022 against each other. In that one, Devils topped the Islanders 2-1 at the Coliseum. New Jersey's won a season-high 3 in a row. Rangers were in Calgary, lost to the Flames 4-3, all the scoring coming in the first 28 minutes of the game. The Nets were in Dallas, blew a 10-point second-half lead, fell to the Mavs